Ryan Mitchell slammed the crumpled check down on the marble countertop so hard the crystal vases beside it rattled. "Keep it." The millionaire blinked. Nobody had ever walked away from his money. But Ryan was already heading for the door, hands shaking, jaw tight, 8 years of swallowed pride, finally burning its way out of his chest. He had no idea that the worst moment of his life was about to lead him straight to the best one. Drop a comment with your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it moves you, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. The check had been for $2,200. That was the number Ryan Mitchell had written on the invoice. That was the number he and Gerald Hawthorne had agreed on verbally, over a handshake, the way Ryan still believed men were supposed to do business. 3 days of labor, replacing rotted deck boards, reinforcing the support posts underneath, refinishing the whole surface so it looked brand new. Ryan had even driven 40 minutes each way to a specialty lumber yard because Hawthorne wanted a specific grain pattern in the wood. He'd done it without charging extra. He'd done it because he believed in doing the job right. What Hawthorne had handed him was a check for $1,400, and he'd handed it over the way someone hands a dollar bill to a homeless man outside a restaurant, with that particular mixture of charity and contempt that was somehow worse than just being ignored. "Market rate for the work," Hawthorne had said, not even looking up from his phone. I did some research. Ryan had stood there in Hawthorne's kitchen, all 12-foot ceilings, an imported tile, and a refrigerator that probably cost more than Ryan's truck. That check, and feeling something cold move through him. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter and more dangerous than anger. "This is what he thinks you're worth." He'd looked at the check for a long moment. He'd thought about Emma. About the electric bill sitting on his kitchen counter, with "past due" stamped across the front in red letters. About the brake pads on his truck that were grinding now every time he slowed down, and had been grinding for 3 weeks because he kept telling himself he'd get to it next week. He'd thought about all of it, and then he'd put the check down on Hawthorne's marble countertop and walked out. He sat in his truck in Hawthorne's circular driveway for almost 10 minutes before he could make himself turn the key. His hands were shaking. Not from rage, the rage would come later. At 2 in the morning, when he was staring at the ceiling. Right now, his hands were shaking because he'd just turned down $1,400, and he had $340 in his checking account. And Emma's school pictures were due next Friday, and they cost $28, and he'd already told her she could pick whichever package she wanted. "Stupid," he said to nobody. That was stupid, but he didn't go back inside. He pulled out of the driveway and drove. No particular destination. Just moving, because sitting still felt like something he couldn't afford right now. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A text from his sister Karen. "Hey, how'd the Hawthorne job go? Telsfair." He stared at the text at a red light for long enough that the car behind him honked. He typed back, "Fine, on to the next one." He'd been lying to Karen about how things were going for almost a year. She had her own family, her own mortgage, her own stack of problems. She didn't need his on top of hers. The light turned green and he drove. He stopped at the gas station on Meridian, put $7 in the tank, enough to get home, and sat in the parking lot eating a vending machine sandwich that tasted like the plastic it had been wrapped in. 3 years. That was how long it had been since Sarah died. Breast cancer, stage 4, diagnosed 11 months before it killed her. Emma had been 5. Ryan had spent those 11 months working every job he could find during the day and sitting beside Sarah's hospital bed at night, until finally there were no more nights to sit through. After the funeral, after the people stopped coming by with casseroles, after Karen flew back to Portland and his in-laws went back to their lives, after all of that, Ryan had been left alone in a house that still smelled like Sarah's shampoo with an almost 6-year-old who kept asking when Mommy was coming home. He'd answered that question the only way he knew how, by getting up every morning and making Emma's breakfast and packing her lunch and driving her to school, by keeping the lights on, by being there when she came home, by fixing things. That was the one skill Ryan had. He'd learned it from his grandfather James Mitchell, a carpenter, who believed that anything worth making was worth making right. James had taught Ryan that you could tell everything about a man by how he treated materials. Did he rush? Did he cut corners? Did he use the cheap fastener when the good one would hold twice as long? Ryan had carried those lessons into everything he did, and for a while it had been enough. His small company, Mitchell Home Repair, had built a decent reputation. Word of mouth, repeat clients, nothing that made him rich but enough. Then the economy softened. Then insurance costs went up. Then his truck started dying in increments, one expensive system at a time. Then 2 of his best clients moved away, and replacing them took longer than he expected, and the hole in his finances got a little deeper every month. And somewhere along the way, Ryan Mitchell went from being a man with a struggling business to being a man that wealthy people hired when they wanted quality work at a price they could feel good about underpaying. He'd let it happen. That was the thing that kept him awake at night. He'd let it happen because he needed the jobs, and because some part of him, some quiet, exhausted part, had started to believe that maybe this was simply what his life was now. Survival. Just survival. He threw the rest of the sandwich away and drove home. Emma was at the kitchen table when he walked in, doing her homework with the focused intensity she brought to everything. She had Sarah's eyes, dark brown, serious, the kind of eyes that looked at you like they could see further than you could. "How was school?" Ryan asked, dropping his keys on the counter. "We learned about ecosystems." She didn't look up from her paper. "Did you know that if you remove one species from an ecosystem, it can change everything else? Even species that seem completely unrelated." "I didn't know that. Mrs. Patterson says it's called a cascading effect." Now she looked up. "Dad, you look tired." "I'm fine. You always say that." "Because I'm always fine." Emma studied him with those serious dark eyes in a way that made him feel like she was 40 years old. Then she said, "There's leftover spaghetti in the fridge." "I put it in a container so it would be easy." She'd made dinner again. She did that, sometimes came home from school, started the water boiling, handled it all before he got back. 8 years old, and already trying to take care of him. Something tightened in Ryan's chest. He kept his voice easy. "You didn't have to do that, Em. I wanted to." He reheated the spaghetti and sat across from her while she finished her homework, and for a while, the kitchen felt like a quiet, safe thing. Emma humming under her breath, the sound of her pencil on paper. The old refrigerator doing its irregular ticking. "This is what you're working for," he told himself. This, right here, he was almost convinced. His phone rang at 8:47 p.m. after Emma was in bed. Unknown number, local area code. He almost didn't answer, he was tired, and unknown numbers at night were usually either spam or people who'd gotten his number from some contractor directory and wanted a quote at an inconvenient hour. But 340 in the bank has a way of making you answer calls. Mitchell Home Repair. A pause. Then a woman's voice, controlled, precise. Each word placed with deliberate care, the way expensive furniture is placed in a room. "Is this Ryan Mitchell speaking? My name is Margaret Chen. I'm the estate manager for Sterling Manor. We have a situation with one of our perimeter fence sections that requires immediate attention. I was given your name as someone who does quality work." Ryan straightened slightly on the couch. Sterling Manor. He knew the name. Everybody in the county knew the name. 12 acres in the hills north of town, gated private, belonging to Victoria Sterling, Sterling Global Developments. The kind of name that appeared in Forbes and on the covers of business magazines, and occasionally in the news when Victoria Sterling was closing a deal that would have seemed impossible to anyone who didn't know her. "What kind of damage are we talking about?" he asked. "A section of the main perimeter fence came down after the recent storms. Approximately 60 linear feet, some structural posts compromised. We need it assessed and repaired as soon as possible." "How soon?" "Tomorrow morning if you're available." Ryan was quiet for a beat. He was already thinking through the math. 60 feet of fence, structural posts, probably a day and a half of work, depending on the extent of the damage. Materials. "I can be there at 7:30. I'll have the gate staff expecting you. Please bring your license and insurance documentation." She ended the call with the crisp efficiency of someone who made 12 calls like this before breakfast. Ryan sat holding his phone for a moment. Sterling Manor. He should have been excited. Any other night, he might have been. But he'd done enough work for wealthy clients to know that the address didn't guarantee anything about how a job would go or how he'd be treated at the end of it. He set his phone on the coffee table and looked at the framed photo on the bookshelf. Him and Sarah and Emma at the beach. Emma in a red swimsuit with her arms thrown wide, all three of them laughing at something that was lost now to time. "Big house tomorrow," he said quietly. He went to bed. He didn't sleep well. Sterling Manor's gate was exactly what he'd expected. 12 feet of black iron, camera mounted above, intercom panel on a stone column that looked older than the street it sat on. A young man in a polo shirt came out of the gatehouse, checked Ryan's license and insurance card with the expression of someone who took their gatehouse duties very seriously, and waved him through, with the particular look that said, "Service entrance is around the back." Ryan knew that look. He'd seen it at 100 houses. He drove around the property's edge, following the line of the perimeter fence, which was wooden, old-growth cedar from the look of it, well-maintained in most sections until he found the damaged area. He pulled over and got out. The collapsed section was about 70 feet, longer than the estimate. 3 posts had gone over, taking the rails and pickets with them, in a tangled mess of wood and hardware. The surrounding posts were still standing, but when Ryan crouched and looked at the base of the nearest one, he felt a familiar thing happen, that particular narrowing of attention that came when a job revealed itself to him. He drew out his pocket knife and pressed the blade into the wood near the base. It went in too easily. He pulled the knife out and pushed it in again, 2 inches higher. Still easy. He stood and did the test 3 posts down the line, working his way toward the standing fence section. The posts were already rotted. The voice came from behind him, and Ryan turned. A woman stood maybe 20 feet away. Late 20s, possibly 30, it was hard to say with her. Dark hair pulled back. Simply. Jeans. A gray pullover that might have been expensive, or might have been something she'd grabbed from the back of a closet. Ryan couldn't tell and didn't particularly care. No makeup, or none that was visible. She was watching him with the kind of attention most people reserved for things they were trying to figure out. "Yes," Ryan said. "The storm didn't cause this. The storm finished it." "What's the difference?" "The difference is that those posts have been rotting from the ground up for 2, maybe 3 years. Something with good drainage and a dry climate would have lasted longer. This wasn't maintained. The groundskeeping staff inspects the perimeter monthly. Then they were missing it. Visual inspection won't catch this." He crouched again, pulled a piece of the collapsed rail from the pile, and held it up. From the outside, the wood still had its color, its texture. It looked like wood that had simply been knocked over. "See the grain here? Looks solid. But look at this." He pressed his thumb into the underside of the rail, into the section that had been facing down toward the soil. It dimpled. Water infiltration, probably from where the post base met the ground. Fungal decay. It doesn't announce itself. The woman came closer and looked at what he was showing her. Not the way clients usually looked, the polite, impatient glance that said, "I'm paying you to deal with this, not explain it to me." She actually looked. "How many posts?" she asked. "I need to test all of them, this section and the next 200 feet minimum. But my guess, 8 to 12 are compromised, maybe more. And the options? You can replace the whole section and the adjacent ones while you're at it. Clean break. Or I can pull the compromised posts, sister new ones alongside them, where the integrity is still worth saving, and extend the life of the fence by another decade for about 40% less cost." She was quiet for a moment. "What would you do?" she asked. "If it was yours." The question caught him slightly off guard. It was the kind of question people asked when they actually wanted an answer, not when they were just making conversation. "I'd save what's worth saving," he said. "You don't replace everything just because something went down. Sometimes the bones are still good." She nodded slowly. Not the performative nod of someone agreeing to move the conversation along. "Something more genuine. Do your assessment," she said. "All of it. Take whatever time you need. I'll have Margaret bring you the estate maintenance records so you can see the inspection logs." She turned to go, and Ryan said, "I'm sorry, I don't think we were introduced." She looked back at him over her shoulder. "Victoria Sterling." Then she walked back toward the house. The assessment took most of the morning. Ryan worked methodically, testing every post in the affected sections, marking the compromised ones with a strip of orange tape from his toolbox, logging everything in the notebook he always carried. He'd learned the notebook habit from his grandfather. "A job you don't document is a job you can't defend," James had said. Margaret Chen appeared mid-morning with a slim folder of maintenance records typed inspection logs going back 4 years, with handwritten notes in the margins. Ryan went through them carefully while he worked. The inspections had been done. He could see that, but whoever had been doing them had been looking at the fence from the outside, checking for visible damage, grading the cosmetic condition. Nobody had been doing what Ryan was doing, getting down low, probing the post bases, checking the actual structural integrity. It was the kind of gap that looked like thoroughness until something fell over. His phone buzzed at 11:15. Emma, from the school number. He answered immediately. "Hey, Em, you okay?" "I'm fine." She used her patient voice, the one that meant she thought he worried too much. "We're having lunch. I just wanted to tell you something." "Tell me." Jalen brought a frog to school today in his backpack, and it escaped in the hallway and Mrs. Patterson screamed. Ryan put his hand over his mouth to keep from laughing in a way that would carry across the grounds. "That's a lot of information, Emma." "I know. I thought you should have it." A pause. "Also, are you okay? You seemed sad last night." He stopped walking. 8 years old. 8 years old, and she was checking in on him from the school cafeteria. "I'm good, Em. I'm working on something interesting today." "What kind of interesting?" "A big fence. I'll tell you tonight." "Okay." Another pause. "Shorter, Dad?" "Yeah, I looked up the electricity bill this morning. I know it's past due." The bottom dropped out of his stomach. He'd been careful to keep the bills out of her sight. He thought he'd been careful. It's okay. I just wanted you to know that I know, so you don't have to hide it. We can figure it out together." He stood in the middle of Victoria Sterling's property, with a strip of orange tape in his hand, and said nothing for a moment, because there was nothing to say to that. Nothing adequate. "We're fine," he managed finally. "I promise, enjoy your lunch." "Oh, bye, Dad." She hung up. Ryan stood there a little longer than he needed to, looking at the orange tape in his hand, and then he put his phone away and went back to work. He finished the assessment at 12:40 and spent 20 minutes in his truck, working through the numbers. When he had them, he went up to the house and knocked. Margaret Chen opened the door and showed him to a room that Ryan guessed was some kind of secondary office bookshelves, a work table, less formal than the images he'd seen online of Victoria Sterling's main office at Sterling Global Headquarters. Victoria was already there, standing at the window with a phone pressed to her ear. She held up one finger, "Give me a minute," and turned partly away, and Ryan couldn't help catching fragments of what she was saying. "That's not what the agreement specified, David. I understand his position, but the position he had, and the position the contract describes, are not the same thing, and I need you to make that distinction clear. No, don't soften it." She ended the call, turned back, and whatever had been in her voice on the phone was gone, sealed off, filed away. She sat down across from him like the call had never happened. "What's the damage?" Ryan handed her the assessment sheet. 11 posts are compromised. 3 are borderline. I'd recommend pulling them now rather than waiting. The adjacent fence sections are solid. If we do this right, you won't have this problem again for 15 to 20 years. She reviewed the sheet. Her eyes moved quickly, systematically, the eyes of someone who processed information fast and retained most of it. "Cost, materials, labor, the works I'm at 18.4. I can have a detailed breakdown to you by end of day." She looked up from the sheet. "The crew? I work with one other guy on larger projects. On something this size, it's him and me, maybe 4 days. When can you start?" "Day after tomorrow if you want to move quickly." "Tomorrow, I need to source the materials. I want to match the existing fence grade as closely as possible. It's old-growth cedar. I know a yard that carries it." "Do that." She set the assessment sheet down. "Mr. Mitchell?" "Ryan." A small pause, as though she was deciding whether to accept the informality. "Ryan, I want to ask you something, and I'd like you to answer honestly, even if you think the answer might cost you the job." He held her gaze. "All right, were the inspections done negligently, or was this genuinely difficult to catch?" He thought about it. He thought about the maintenance logs, about the typed reports, and the margin notes, about the person who'd written them, and what they'd been looking for. "Genuinely difficult," he said. "The decay pattern on these posts is subsurface. From outside and above, this fence looked excellent. The person doing the inspections was doing what they'd been trained to do. Nobody trained them for this." She was quiet for a moment. "I appreciate that," she said finally. "It's just the truth." "That," Victoria Sterling said, with something in her voice that Ryan couldn't quite classify. is rarer than you might think. He came back the next day to begin staging materials, and the day after that, with his partner Danny Okafor. Big, methodical Danny, who could read a structural problem the way other people read a book, and who had been working with Ryan off and on for 6 years. They fell into their rhythm, pulling compromised posts, setting new ones in concrete, letting them cure, matching the cedar grain, running rails. Ryan worked the detail work himself. Danny managed the physical load. They talked when they needed to and were quiet when they didn't. On the second day of work, Victoria came out mid-afternoon. She stood back and watched for a few minutes without speaking. Ryan noticed her the way he always noticed things peripherally, without breaking his concentration. She said, "Finally, you replaced that post already." "From this morning." "Yes, that was fast. Concrete was set. No reason to wait." Another silence. Danny was 30 feet away, working the post holes, giving no indication he was listening to anything. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said. "Sure. When you're repairing something like this, something that's structurally compromised but cosmetically intact, how do you know when to save it and when to start over?" Ryan kept working as he answered. "You test it. You put pressure on it and see what happens. If the core is still solid, you build from there. If the core is gone, if there's nothing left underneath the surface that has integrity, then you're not repairing it. You're just covering it up." He glanced at her then briefly. "And covering something up doesn't fix it. It just delays the collapse." Victoria looked at him for a moment with an expression he couldn't read. Then she said, "No, it doesn't." She went back inside. Danny appeared at Ryan's shoulder 2 minutes later, keeping his voice low. "Man, she's intense. She's got a lot going on. How do you know?" Ryan picked up his next cedar rail and held it against the post, checking the fit. "Same way I know a post is rotted from the inside," he said. "You just look at it long enough." Danny glanced at the house, then back at Ryan. "You're a weird dude, you know that? You've mentioned it." That evening, Ryan was loading tools into his truck when a silver Mercedes pulled up on the estate road, not through the main gate, but through a secondary entrance Ryan hadn't noticed before, set back from the main drive. The man who got out was in his mid-40s, built like someone who'd been athletic in college and never quite forgiven himself for letting it go. Expensive suit, the kind that communicated money without announcing it. He looked at Ryan's truck the way people look at furniture that belongs in a different room. He didn't acknowledge Ryan. He walked toward the house with his phone in his hand, already typing. Ryan watched him go. Something about the man's walk stuck in his memory. Not aggressive exactly, more like someone moving through a space they intended to own. He was still thinking about it on the drive home. Emma had made pasta again. She'd added a salad this time, a proper one with the cherry tomatoes she liked. They ate together at the kitchen table, and Ryan told her about the Sterling property the way he always told her about his jobs, the structural details, the problem-solving, the particular satisfaction of finding out what was actually wrong instead of what appeared to be wrong. Emma listened with the focused attention she gave to things she found genuinely interesting. "So the fence looked fine," she said, "but it was broken from underneath?" "Right, like a tooth," she said. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "A tooth can look totally fine from the outside," Emma explained, with the authority of someone who'd had 2 cavities and remembered everything the dentist had said about them. And then the dentist x-rays it, and there's a cavity in the root. And it doesn't hurt until one day she made a collapsing gesture with her hand. Ryan looked at his daughter. "That's exactly like a tooth," he said. She seemed pleased. "What's the lady like? The rich one?" Ryan considered. "Hard to read, smart, asks good questions." "Is she nice?" I think he paused, looking for the right word. "I think she's been around a lot of people who weren't honest with her for a long time. So she doesn't know what to do with somebody who just says the thing." Emma nodded seriously. "That makes sense. Jalen's like that. His brother always tricks him, so now he doesn't believe anything anyone says." "How do you get Jalen to believe you?" "I just keep saying what I'm going to do and then doing it," Emma said, with the calm practicality of someone who'd figured this out through trial and error. "Eventually he gets it." Ryan looked at his daughter for a long moment. He thought, "I hope you stay exactly like this. I hope the world doesn't take this from you." He said, "That's good, Em. That's really good." On the third day of work, Ryan arrived to find a black Escalade parked near the main entrance that hadn't been there before. He didn't think much of it until mid-morning, when he became aware of voices from an open window somewhere on the ground floor of the house. Not the words, just the register. A male voice, low and deliberate, with the particular cadence of someone making a point they expected to land with weight. Then Victoria's voice, shorter, controlled. Then the male voice again. Ryan kept working. At lunch, when Danny had gone to his truck to eat, Victoria came outside. She was wearing the same expression she'd had when he'd first seen her on the phone, that sealed-off look, everything below the surface. She stood near the fence line and looked at the section they'd completed, running her eyes along the new posts. "You do good work," she said, without looking at him. "Thank you. Do you know who Alexander Reed is?" Ryan recognized the name vaguely. Technology, finance. One of those names that appeared in business news without quite becoming famous. "I know of him," Ryan said. "Business? He's my business partner." Another pause. "He was in the house this morning. I saw the car." Victoria looked at him then. "He wanted to know why I was having the fence repaired." Ryan waited. Not whether it needed repairing, why I was doing it now, whether it was the best use of company resources. Her voice remained level. "He has opinions about resource allocation." "It's your property," Ryan said. "Yes." She looked back at the fence. "It is." Something in the way she said it told Ryan that the question of whose property it was, whose company it was, whose decision it was, none of those questions were quite as settled as they should have been. He went back to work, and he started paying attention to things he hadn't been paying attention to before. The orange tape. He'd left his assessments marked when he'd finished all the compromised posts flagged, the documentation in his notebook. Standard practice. He knew exactly where every marker was. On the morning of day 4, he counted them while he was pulling the last of the compromised posts. One was missing, not a post, the orange tape marker. One of the flags he'd placed on a post, in the section furthest from the main work area, the section nearest the secondary gate where the Mercedes had come in. It was a small thing. It could have been nothing. Wind, a groundskeeper who'd inadvertently removed it, a dozen explanations. But Ryan was a man who noticed when things weren't where he'd left them, and his grandfather had taught him to trust that noticing. He walked the perimeter of that section carefully, crouching, testing the same posts he'd already tested. Then he found something. It wasn't part of the fence. It was a folded document tucked into the gap between a post base and the soil, partially covered by disturbed earth, the kind of disturbance that looks random until you realize it's too deliberate to be accidental. Ryan didn't open it immediately. He looked at it for a moment, thinking about what he was doing, what it meant to pick it up. Then he picked it up and unfolded it. It was a printout of something financials, or what looked like financials. Numbers, dates, a property address he recognized as the Sterling Manor address, and another address he didn't recognize. Handwritten notes in the margins in ink that had started to bleed from moisture. He couldn't make out most of the notes. What he could make out, at the bottom of the page, in letters slightly larger than the rest, was a date 14 days from now and 2 words he understood immediately, in any context. Final assessment. Ryan stood in the September light with the document in his hands, looking at it, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. This isn't just a fence job. He folded the document carefully and put it in the breast pocket of his jacket. Then he finished pulling the last compromised post, set it aside, and went to find Victoria Sterling. Margaret Chen told him Victoria was in a meeting. Ryan said it could wait. Then he looked at Margaret Chen, with the kind of expression that made clear it actually could not wait, and something in his face must have communicated that, because she picked up the desk phone, said 3 quiet words into it, and pointed him toward the hallway. Victoria met him at the door of the secondary office. She took one look at his face and stepped back to let him in, and she closed the door behind him without asking what it was about. Ryan placed the folded document on the work table between them. She looked at it without touching it. "Where did you find this?" "Post base, section 7, near the secondary gate. Someone buried it shallow recent, within the last few days. The ink is water damaged, but the paper isn't fully degraded." Victoria unfolded it. She read it the way she read everything, fast, systematic, her eyes moving top to bottom without expression. But Ryan was watching her hands, and her hands were not entirely still. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. "Financials of some kind." I recognized the Sterling Manor address. I couldn't read most of the margin notes. She refolded the document. She was quiet for a long moment, in the way people are quiet when they're making a decision that will have consequences either way. This, she said carefully, is a preliminary property assessment. The kind that gets commissioned when someone is preparing to demonstrate that an asset is being mismanaged. Ryan waited. Someone commissioned a shadow assessment of this property. Without my knowledge, without my authorization, she set the document down. And then someone left it here, or lost it, Ryan said. People like Alexander Reed don't lose things by accident. She said the name flatly, without heat, the way you say the name of something you've been watching for a long time and are no longer surprised by. Ryan looked at the document on the table between them and thought about the silver Mercedes through the secondary gate, about the orange tape marker that had been moved, about the particular quality of Alexander Reed's walk like a man moving through a space he intended to own. He came onto the property, Ryan said, the day before yesterday, through the back entrance. Victoria looked at him. You saw him. I saw the car. I saw him walk to the house. He comes here occasionally. He's my business partner. It isn't unusual. Is it unusual for him to walk the perimeter fence line? Victoria was very still. Say what you saw, she said. I didn't see him at the fence, but that tape marker was in place at end of day Tuesday. Wednesday morning it was gone, and that document was in the ground 12 feet from where the marker had been. He paused. I could be wrong about the connection, but you don't think you are? No. She picked up the document again and held it, not reading it, just holding it. Ryan had the sense she was running through a sequence of events in her head, checking each one against the others, the way you check a structure for load points. The board meeting is in 3 weeks, she said finally. Not to him, exactly. More like thinking out loud, testing the thought against the air. Alexander has been building a case for the past 6 months that I'm distracted, emotionally compromised, that the decisions I've been making for Sterling Global reflect personal priorities rather than business priorities. Is that true? She looked at him sharply. I mean, is there anything in how you've been running the company that he could actually use? Or is he manufacturing it? The sharpness eased slightly. She set the document down again. Both, she said. He's manufacturing the narrative. But he's building it around real decisions. I've made investments in workforce development programs, partnership agreements with smaller contractors, a housing initiative in 2 underserved districts that won't show return for 3 to 5 years. A pause. Decisions he considers sentimental. Are they? They're strategic over a longer horizon than Alexander thinks in. She looked at Ryan directly. He thinks in quarters. I think in decades. Ryan looked at the document. And the property assessment, he said. What does it give him? Evidence of neglect. If Sterling Manor is physically deteriorating, if the CEO's own estate is visibly falling apart, it supports the narrative that I'm losing my grip on management. That I'm not paying attention to details. She paused. It's small, but it's the kind of small that adds up in a board presentation when someone is trying to build a pattern. Ryan understood then, with the clarity that sometimes hit him mid-job when all the separate problems suddenly arranged themselves into a single picture. The fence had never been just a fence. You need documentation, he said. Not just that the fence was damaged, that it was damaged due to a pre-existing condition that predated your tenure, was properly assessed, and is being professionally repaired on an appropriate timeline. Victoria looked at him with an expression. He was beginning to recognize the one she got when someone said the thing she'd already arrived at, but hadn't expected to hear from the person currently talking. Yes, she said, I have that. My assessment logs. The maintenance records your staff pulled. Material sourcing records. Everything dated and detailed. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his notebook. Every post I tested, every measurement, every decision point. It's all here. She looked at the notebook. May I? She asked. He handed it to her. She went through it slowly, more slowly than she read anything else, which told him she understood what she was looking at. She stopped at certain pages, read notations twice. You document everything like this? She asked. My grandfather taught me, he said. If you do the work right, you shouldn't need to hide how you did it. Victoria looked up from the notebook. Mr. Mitchell Ryan. She closed the notebook and held it for a moment before handing it back. I need to ask you to do something, and I want to be clear that you are under no obligation to agree, and that your payment for this job is not contingent on your answer. Ask it. I'd like your documentation, not a copy, the originals, properly signed and dated. I'd like your written assessment report, including the finding about pre-existing decay versus storm damage. And I'd like you to be willing, if it comes to it, to present that documentation directly to my board. Ryan held the notebook in his hand. He thought about what he'd been hired to do, which was fix a fence. He thought about the line between doing a job and getting involved in something that had nothing to do with him. He thought about Alexander Reed's walk and the buried document and the missing orange tape marker. He thought about Emma saying, "I know, so you don't have to hide it. We can figure it out together." "I can do that," he said. "It's just the truth. I'm just telling the truth." Something shifted in Victoria Sterling's face. Not dramatically, she was not a dramatic person. He was learning. But something shifted. "Thank you," she said. And she said it like she meant it specifically, not like it was a social reflex. Ryan put the notebook back in his jacket. "I need to finish the north section today if we're going to cure by Friday." "Was there anything else?" Victoria almost smiled. "No. That's everything." He went back to work. Danny was waiting at the truck, eating a sandwich with the expression of a man who had learned over 6 years not to ask questions when Ryan had that particular look on his face. Ryan picked up his nail gun and headed for the north section. "Everything good?" Danny asked, falling into step beside him. "Fine. You were in there a while. Found something in the post-excavation. Had to report it." Danny chewed his sandwich. "What kind of something?" "Documents." Danny was quiet for 3 steps. Ryan. "Man, tell me we're not in something complicated. We're fine." "That's what you said about the Beaumont job." "The Beaumont job was different. The Beaumont job ended with us not getting paid for 2 weeks because there was a lawsuit. This isn't a lawsuit situation." "How do you know?" Ryan picked up the first rail and held it to the post, checked the level. "Because the woman in there is going to handle it herself. I just gave her what she needed to do it." Danny finished his sandwich in silence. "Then she seemed like she can handle it." Ryan drove the first nail. "Yeah," he said, "she really does." They finished the north section by 4 o'clock and began staging for the final run along the east perimeter. The afternoon light was going long and amber across the property, and Ryan had that feeling he got at the end of a job that was going right, a kind of physical satisfaction that didn't have a better word than rightness. Things were where they were supposed to be. The structure was sound. He was cleaning tools at the truck when he heard footsteps on the gravel path, and when he looked up, it was not Victoria. It was Alexander Reed. He was in a different suit than the one from 2 days ago, charcoal, well-tailored, the kind of gray that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. He had his hands in his pockets, and he was moving with the unhurried confidence of someone who had calculated exactly how much time they had and found the number comfortable. He stopped about 10 feet from Ryan's truck and looked at the fence line. "Good work," he said. He didn't look at Ryan when he said it. "Thank you." Now he looked. He had light eyes, blue or gray, with the quality of a camera lens, taking in information, giving nothing back. "How long have you been working for Victoria?" "This is my 4th day on this job." "First time working the Sterling property?" "Yes." Reed nodded slowly, like Ryan had confirmed something. "She finds people through referrals mostly, likes to keep things personal." A pause. "Who referred you?" Ryan held his gaze. "The estate manager called me." "Right, Margaret." Reed seemed to file that away. "You're a small operation?" "Just you," and he glanced at Danny, who was pointedly loading tools and not looking over. "Your associate." "That's right. Mitchell Home Repair, is it?" So he'd already looked it up. Ryan registered that without showing it. "That's right." Reed rocked back on his heels slightly, looking at the fence again. "Victoria has a gift for finding overlooked talent," he said. "It's one of her better qualities. She sees potential where other people see liability." A pause that lasted exactly 1 beat too long. "It can also be a vulnerability. She extends trust quickly. Not everyone deserves it." Ryan put down the rag he was holding. He didn't fold his arms. He kept his posture easy, his weight balanced, the way his grandfather had taught him to stand when someone was trying to figure out if they could push you. "Were you looking for me?" Ryan said, "or did you just happen to be walking by?" Reed looked at him for a moment. Something moved behind those camera lens eyes, not surprise. "Exactly." "Recalibration." Just making conversation, Reed said pleasantly. Then I'll let you get to it. I've got tools to load. Reed stood there for one more moment, the moment of a man deciding whether to push or pivot. He pivoted. Good work on the fence, he said again. Genuinely. And he walked back toward the house. Ryan watched him go. Then he picked up the rag again and finished cleaning the nail gun. Danny appeared at his shoulder. Who was that? Victoria's business partner. What did he want? Ryan thought about the document in his jacket pocket. About the missing orange tape. About the way Reed had said Victoria extends trust quickly, not like a compliment, like a diagnosis. He wanted to know what I know, Ryan said, and whether I'm the kind of person who can be managed. Danny looked at him. And what are you going to do? Finish the fence. He stopped for gas on the way home, and while he stood at the pump, he called Karen. She answered on the second ring. Hey, stranger, I was starting to think you'd moved. I've been busy. Good busy or bad busy, he thought about that. 3 days ago, he would have said bad. He would have described the Hawthorne job, with the careful phrasing he used, when he didn't want Karen to hear how bad things actually were. Interesting busy, he said. I'm on a job up at Sterling Manor. A pause. The Sterling Manor? Victoria Sterling? Yeah. Ryan. How did you land that? Estate manager called me. Karen made a sound that wasn't quite a word. That's significant. That's a real opportunity. It's a fence job. It's a foot in the door. Do you understand what that could mean for your business? If Sterling Global starts referring contractor. Karen, it's a fence job. I'm just doing it right. That's what you always say, because it's always true. She was quiet for a second, the particular quiet of someone deciding whether to say the next thing. How are you really, Ryan? And don't say fine. He watched the numbers turn on the pump display. I walked out on a job Monday, he said. Guy shorted me $800 and handed it over like I should be grateful. Ryan, I know, I needed the money, but I couldn't. He stopped. Started again. I couldn't stand there and take it. Not anymore. No, Karen said quietly. I don't think you could. Em knew about the electric bill. I didn't know she knew. A long pause. Oh, honey, she said, we could figure it out together. His voice did something he didn't intend on the last word, and he paused until it settled. 8 years old. She's Sarah's daughter, Karen said. What do you expect? He didn't have an answer for that. He watched the pump click off. I'm okay, he said. I'm really okay. This job. There's something about it. Something good. He thought about Victoria, reading his notebook. About the document in the soil. About Alexander Reed's camera lens eyes. I don't know yet, he said honestly. But it feels like something. Then pay attention to it, Karen said. You've always been good at that. Paying attention. Emma was still up when he got home, which was unusual. She was at the kitchen table with a book, but she wasn't reading it. She was sitting in the particular, still way she sat when she was thinking hard about something. You're supposed to be in bed, Ryan said. I know. I was thinking. He put his bag down and sat across from her. About what? The fence lady, Victoria Sterling. Yeah. Emma turned the book over in her hands. Is she nice to you? Yes. She treats me professionally. That's not the same as nice. You're right. It's not. He thought about it. I think she's someone who doesn't let herself be nice until she's sure it's safe. Emma considered this. Because people have been mean to her? More like people have wanted things from her. And that makes it hard to know who's actually there for you. Emma turned the book again. That sounds lonely. I think it probably is. She looked up at him. Do you like her? He thought about Victoria, with his notebook open in her hands. About the way she'd said thank you, specifically, like she was giving something she didn't give easily. I respect her, he said. That's a start. Emma seemed satisfied with that. She stood up and tucked the book under her arm. Dad. Yeah, that man at her house, the one in the nice car. Ryan went still. How do you know about him? You mentioned there was a man at the job site. And I could tell by your voice he was a bad kind of man. He looked at his daughter. Stay out of things that aren't your concern, Em, he said. Gently but clearly. I know. I just want to know if you're going to be okay. I'm going to be fine. Because you always say that. Because it's always true. She looked at him, with those Sarah eyes steady, patient, seeing further than she let on. Okay, Dad, she said. She went to bed. Ryan sat at the kitchen table for a long time after, with the quiet of the house around him and the document he'd found, still folded in his jacket pocket. And he thought about everything he'd put himself in the middle of in 4 days, on a job that was supposed to be about wood and concrete and orange tape markers. He thought about what Victoria had told him, that Reed was building a case, that the board meeting was 3 weeks out, that the decisions Victoria had made workforce programs, smaller contractors, housing initiatives were being reframed as weakness. He thought about all the people like him, the people those programs were supposed to reach. He thought about Hawthorne, handing over that short check like a man feeding a stray. Then he took the document out of his pocket and unfolded it again on the kitchen table under the light. He looked at it for a long time. He took out his notebook and wrote down every number he could read, every word in the margins that was still legible. He cross-referenced the property addresses against what he knew. He wasn't an accountant, and he wasn't a lawyer, and there were sections of the document he couldn't interpret. But there was enough. There was enough to show that someone had paid for a property assessment of Sterling Manor that had no legitimate business purpose, that had been commissioned not to understand the asset, but to document its deterioration for use in another context entirely. Ryan closed the notebook. He sat back and looked at the ceiling. He thought about Emma saying, "We can figure it out together." He thought about his grandfather saying, "If you do the work right, you shouldn't need to hide how you did it." He thought about Sarah in the last months, when the cancer had made every day a negotiation, and she'd still found the energy to look at him and say, "Don't make yourself small for people who don't deserve you." He wasn't small. He had never been small. He had just been surviving. He picked up his phone and typed a text to Victoria Sterling's number, which Margaret Chen had texted him at the end of day 1 for scheduling purposes. Found more information in the document that may be relevant. "I've made a record. When you're ready to review it, I'm available." He sent it. He sat there in his kitchen, with the house quiet around him, and waited. The response came back in 4 minutes. "Tomorrow, 8 o'clock. Come to the front door." Ryan looked at the text for a moment. Then he put his phone down, turned off the kitchen light, and went to check on Emma. She was asleep with her book still under her arm, her face completely relaxed, in the way that only happened when she was really out, all that gravity and seriousness smoothed away. Just a kid. Just his kid. He pulled the book out gently, set it on her nightstand, pulled the blanket up. He stood there in the dark of her room for a minute. Don't make yourself small for people who don't deserve you. He went to bed. For the first time in a long time, he slept. Victoria opened the front door herself at 8 o'clock, which he hadn't expected. He'd expected Margaret, or staff, or an intercom. She was in her work clothes, a structured jacket, dark, the kind that said, "I take this seriously," without needing to announce it. She had coffee. She did not offer him any. Not from rudeness, but from the focused distraction of someone already 3 steps into their morning. She led him to the main office this time, not the secondary room. It was different, larger, with the organized density of a place where real work happened. Stacks that had specific meaning. A white board with 3 columns of notes in small, precise handwriting. He sat across from her. He put the notebook on the desk and opened it to the page where he transcribed the document, and he walked her through what he'd been able to read and what he'd cross-referenced and what he thought it meant. She listened without interrupting. She was the best listener he'd encountered in a long time, not passive, not just waiting for her turn, but actively processing, her eyes moving between his face and the notebook. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "The second address," she said. "The one you don't recognize. I ran it online last night. It's a holding company, Delaware registered, 3 years old. Reed Capital Partners filed an LLC in Delaware 3 years ago," Victoria said quietly. "I knew about it. It's supposed to be a separate personal investment vehicle. Our partnership agreement requires disclosure of outside entities, and he disclosed it. But I've never been given full visibility into what it holds." She paused. "If he used that LLC to commission the shadow assessment, then it's not a personal investment vehicle." "No," she looked at the notebook. "No, it's not." She stood up and went to the whiteboard. She uncapped a marker and wrote something in the 3rd column. Ryan couldn't read it from where he was sitting, but it was short. 3 or 4 words. She capped the marker. "I have a lawyer," she said. "Corporate litigation. He's been on standby for 2 months because I knew something like this was coming. I just didn't have the specificity." Do you have it now? She turned from the whiteboard. I have the beginning of it. A found document isn't enough. But a found document plus your assessment records, plus the LLC connection, plus 6 months of decisions Reed has been trying to reframe. She stopped herself. Yes, I think I have enough to start. Ryan closed the notebook. The fence will be done Friday, he said. Victoria looked at him. For a moment, she seemed to be looking at him the way she looked at his assessment report, actually seeing it, not just the surface. Ryan, she said. Yeah, why are you helping me with this? She held up her hand slightly. I don't mean why did you bring me the document. I mean why are you still sitting here? Why did you spend last night going through numbers that have nothing to do with fixing a fence? He thought about that, honestly. Because I've watched people get taken apart by other people who decided they didn't matter, he said. And I have a notebook full of evidence that your fence was being managed badly long before you had any reason to be paying attention to it. That's not negligence, that's inherited failure. And someone is trying to use it against you. He paused. I don't like that, he said simply. I don't like when the truth gets used backwards. Victoria Sterling looked at him for a long, steady moment. Neither do I, she said, and something between them settled then, not into friendship exactly, not yet, not something that had a comfortable name, but into something solid, the way a post settles into properly cured concrete, the way two people recognize in each other the same hard-won thing, arrived at from entirely different directions. Ryan picked up his notebook. I'll have Danny here at 7:30, he said. We can finish the east perimeter by noon. I'll have Margaret leave the gate open. Good. One more thing, Victoria said. He waited. The documentation you put together last night. Keep a copy somewhere that isn't on this property. He looked at her. Send it to someone you trust, she said. Not for my benefit, for yours. He understood what she was saying. He understood why she was saying it. Okay, he said. He texted the photos to Karen on the back to the gate. Hold on to these. Don't ask yet. Karen's response came back before he'd reached the end of the estate road. Already saved them. You okay? He looked at the iron gate opening ahead of him. The property behind him, the road forward. He typed back. I really think I am. Danny finished the east perimeter at 11:47 on Friday morning, 13 minutes ahead of Ryan's estimate, which was the kind of thing that would have given Ryan quiet satisfaction on any other job. But his mind was somewhere else. He'd been watching the secondary gate since 7:30. The black Escalade had not appeared. That didn't mean Reed wasn't somewhere on this property. No, it meant Ryan didn't know where he was, which was different and worse. He capped the last post, ran his hand along the rail to check the fit, and stood back to look at the completed fence line. 4 days of work, 73 linear feet of replaced and reinforced structure, 14 new posts, properly set, properly cured. The cedar was matched close enough to the existing fence that you had to know what you were looking for to see the difference. From the outside, the property looked exactly as it had before, solid, maintained, quietly formidable. From the inside, it was a completely different fence than the one Ryan had found. He thought, that's how it always goes. The change is on the inside first. Danny pulled off his work gloves and rolled his shoulders. That's a clean job, man. Yeah, I mean it. That cedar matching, I didn't think you were going to get that close with the yard you found. The grain runs the same direction if you know how to look for it. Danny looked at him sideways. You going to tell me what's been going on this week? Nothing you need to worry about, Ryan. I have been working with you for 6 years. I know you're nothing you need to worry about, face. And that is not it. Ryan picked up his end of the tool bag. Help me load the truck. They loaded in silence. The efficient, practiced silence of two people who've worked together long enough to move around each other without thinking about it. Nail guns, level saw, the orange tape roll, the last of the cedar offcuts. When the truck was loaded, Danny leaned against the tailgate and looked at Ryan. You got involved in something, he said. It wasn't a question. I found something. I reported it. That's the extent of my involvement. And the part that isn't the extent. Ryan looked at the property. At the fence line they'd built. At the gate open now, the road visible beyond it. Someone is trying to take this place apart, he said. Not the fence, the company, the whole thing. He paused. I'm not going to pretend I didn't see what I saw. Danny was quiet for a moment. Does that put you in a bad position? I don't know yet. Does it put me in a bad position? Ryan looked at him directly. No, I mean that. You're clear. Your name isn't on anything. You weren't part of any conversation about it. And if it comes to anything, I'll make sure that's understood. Danny chewed the inside of his cheek. This is the thing about you, Ryan. You have this quality where you make other people's problems into your problems, and you do it so naturally that you don't even notice you're doing it. I noticed, and you're still doing it. Yeah. Danny pushed off the tailgate. All right, I'll see you Monday for the Carlisle job. 7 o'clock. Don't get yourself into something you can't get out of. I've never been in something I couldn't get out of. Danny gave him the look that 6 years had made very clear meant that is an objectively false statement and walked to his own truck. Ryan waited until Danny had driven out before he went back to the house. He knocked. Margaret opened the door and showed him in without him having to ask. Victoria was in the main office again. On the phone, the same controlled voice he'd heard that first morning, the voice that gave nothing away to whoever was on the other end. She held up one finger, and Ryan sat down and looked at the whiteboard. The third column had more notes in it now. Still small, still precise, but more of them, and some had been underlined. Victoria ended the call. The fence is done, Ryan said. I know, I watched you finish. He hadn't seen her watching. He filed that away. My lawyer reviewed what you sent, she said. The transcription of the document, the LLC information, the assessment records. He wants to speak with you directly. About what? To ask you some questions about where you found the document and how. Chain of custody, he wants to understand it before he decides whether it's usable. Usable in what context? If this reaches the board, I need to present clean evidence. Nothing that can be characterized as obtained improperly or interpreted as a setup. Ryan thought about that. He thought about how it would look the handyman who found documents buried in the ground and then became a witness in a corporate board dispute. He thought about how that story could be written from Alexander Reed's perspective. And he didn't like how it read. I found it in the soil during standard post-base excavation, he said. I have the GPS timestamp on my phone from when I photographed the post location. I have the assessment log that shows I was working that section that morning. The sequence is documented. That's exactly what Martin will want to hear you say. Martin is your lawyer? Martin Cho. He's been with me for 8 years. She paused. He's discreet, he's honest. He's the best at what he does. She looked at Ryan. Like you. The comparison settled in the room between them without fanfare. Ryan accepted it without comment. When does he want to meet? He asked. Tomorrow, if you're available. His office downtown, 11 o'clock. I can do that. Victoria nodded. Then she reached into a folder on her desk and slid an envelope across to Ryan. Your payment, full amount from the original estimate, plus 15% for the quality of work and the extended timeline. Ryan picked up the envelope. He didn't open it, but the weight of it told him enough. He thought about $340 in his checking account. About the electric bill with its red past due stamp. About Emma's school pictures. Thank you, he said. Ryan. Victoria's voice shifted, not softer exactly, but more direct in a way that felt personal rather than professional. I want to say something, and I want you to actually hear it. He waited. What you did this week, finding that document, bringing it to me, spending your own time working through the information, all of it, you weren't obligated to do any of that. You were hired to fix a fence. You could have done the job, taken the payment, driven away, and none of this would have been your problem. I know, most people would have. I'm not most people. No, Victoria said, you're not. She held his gaze steadily. I don't take that for granted. I want you to know that. Ryan looked at the woman across from him, the one the business press photographed with her face composed into an expression that said, I am impenetrable, and saw something underneath it that the cameras couldn't capture. Not vulnerability, exactly. Something more specific. The particular weariness of someone who had been alone in a hard position for a long time, and was only now, slowly, allowing themselves to register that fact. He understood that particular tiredness. He'd felt it himself for 3 years. The fence is the job I took, he said. The rest of it is just who I am. Victoria looked at him for another moment. Then she nodded once, and the professional surface reasserted itself, and she picked up her phone. Martin's office, 11 o'clock tomorrow. I'll send the address to your number. Ryan stood and picked up his invoice copy from the desk. He was almost to the door when she said, Ryan. He turned. Emma, your daughter. She's in 3rd grade? He was surprised she knew that. 2nd, she'll be 9 in December. Is she doing well? It was an unexpected question from this woman, in this office, on this particular day. He thought about Emma at the kitchen table, with her serious dark eyes and her book. About the spaghetti in the container. About her voice on the school phone, saying, "I know, so you don't have to hide it." "She's better than I deserve," he said honestly. Victoria nodded, and something moved across her face that came and went too quickly to fully read. Something that looked very briefly like longing. "Good," she said, and turned back to her phone. Ryan walked out into the Friday afternoon and sat in his truck and opened the envelope. He sat there for a long time. Then he drove to the utility company and paid the electric bill in person, in cash, and asked for a printed receipt. Martin Cho's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown that announced its seriousness through marble and the specific quality of silence that expensive square footage produces. Ryan arrived in the clothes he wore to meet clients, clean work pants, his best flannel boots that he'd polished the night before. Emma had watched him polish the boots with the expression of someone witnessing an unusual natural phenomenon. "You're nervous," she'd said. "I'm not nervous. You polish your boots when you're nervous. You did it before Mom's hospital appointments, too." He'd looked at the boot in his hand. "I just like clean boots," he'd said. "Okay, Dad." He'd polished both boots to a high shine and felt marginally better. Martin Cho turned out to be a small man in his early 50s, precisely organized, with the quality of attention that reminded Ryan of a very good structural engineer, someone who looked at things to understand them, not to impress you with the looking. He wore no tie. He had a yellow legal pad and a pen and a cup of tea that he never drank. He asked Ryan to walk him through everything from the beginning. Ryan did. Cho made notes on the legal pad in a shorthand. Ryan couldn't read and asked questions only. When Ryan paused, small, specific questions that revealed he'd already thought 3 steps ahead. When Ryan finished, Cho set his pen down and looked at his notes. "The original document you gave it to Miss Sterling directly?" "Yes, the same day I found it." "And your transcriptions that was done from memory or from the original while you still had it?" "From the original. I had it for about 40 minutes before I brought it to her. I wrote down everything I could read. The handwritten margin notes, you said they were partially degraded. What percentage would you estimate was legible?" "Maybe 60%. The address in the margin on the 3rd page was fully readable. The dollar figures in the 2nd column were clear. The handwriting in the right margin maybe half. And the date at the bottom, fully legible. I wouldn't have flagged it otherwise." Cho nodded slowly. He picked up his pen again, wrote something, underlined it. "Mr. Mitchell, I want to ask you something that isn't about the document." "Go ahead. Have you had any direct conversation with Alexander Reed about this matter? Anything he said to you that could be interpreted as relating to the fence, the property assessment, or Victoria's position at the company?" Ryan thought about Reed at the truck, his hands in his pockets, his camera lens eyes. Victoria extends trust quickly. It can also be a vulnerability. He came to the job site on day 4, spoke to me briefly. He commented on the quality of the work, asked about my business, mentioned that Victoria finds overlooked talent through referrals. Ryan paused. Then he said she extends trust quickly and that it can be a vulnerability. Cho's pen stopped moving. He said that, word for word. In what tone? Conversational, like he was warning me. Or like he was seeing if I understood what he was implying. And what did you understand him to be implying? That Victoria trusted me, and that if I were a certain kind of person, that trust could be exploited. Cho looked at Ryan steadily. Was he suggesting that you could be that kind of person? He was finding out whether I was, and I told him I had tools to load and ended the conversation. Cho set his pen down again. He picked up his tea, looked at it, put it back down. "Mr. Mitchell," he said, "I've been doing corporate litigation for 26 years. I have seen a great many situations that looked complicated from the outside and were straightforward from the inside, and an equal number that looked straightforward and were not. This one," he gestured at his legal pad, "is genuinely complicated. What Alexander Reed is attempting is legally ambiguous. He's operating in the space between what is technically permissible and what is ethical, which is where people like him prefer to operate because it's very hard to fight." "I know that space," Ryan said. "People use it on guys like me all the time." Cho looked at him with what appeared to be genuine interest. How so? Verbal agreements that somehow look different when it comes time to pay. Scope changes that aren't documented because you trusted the handshake. Clients who underpay and dare you to sue them for $800 when the legal cost would be 3 times that. Ryan held the lawyer's gaze. It's the same thing, just bigger numbers. Cho considered that for a moment. Yes, he said, it is the same thing. He picked up his pen again. I'll be presenting Victoria's case to the board if it comes to a formal proceeding. I'd like your assessment documentation to be part of the record. Your analysis is technically sound, and the documentation practices you use, he glanced at the copies Ryan had brought, are actually more rigorous than what most professional property inspectors produce. My grandfather believed in paperwork. Your grandfather was right. Cho made another note. I'd like to put you on a short list of potential witnesses. Non-compelled, you won't be subpoenaed. But if the board calls for a full presentation and Victoria's counsel is permitted to introduce supporting testimony, your presence would be valuable. Ryan was quiet for a moment, processing what that meant. What it would mean to sit in front of Victoria Sterling board and say what he'd seen and found with Alexander Reed in the same room. Would that put me in Reed's crosshairs? He asked. Cho didn't hedge. It could. He would likely attempt to characterize your testimony as influenced and argue that you have a financial interest in Victoria maintaining her position because she's currently your client. I've been paid in full. Job's done. I have no ongoing financial relationship with Victoria Sterling. Which would be your response? Cho tapped his pen against the legal pad. He would also attempt to discredit you by looking into your business history, past clients, any disputes or complaints. Ryan thought about that. He thought about every difficult client, every short payment, every verbal agreement that had been reinterpreted after the fact. He thought about whether any of it, in Reed's hands, could be made to look like something it wasn't. I don't have a perfect record, he said. Nobody who's been in business as long as I have does. I've had disputes. I've had clients who weren't happy. I've had jobs that didn't go exactly right. Can you tell me about them? So Ryan told him. He spent 20 minutes going through every instance he could remember where a job had ended badly, or a client had been unhappy, or a payment had been disputed. He was honest about all of it, where he'd been wrong, where he'd been right, where it was simply a matter of two people seeing the same situation differently. Cho listened to all of it and wrote down very little. When Ryan finished, Cho looked at his notes. That's a clean record, he said. Genuinely. In 26 years, I've prepared witnesses who've handed me things that would make your stories look like parking tickets. He paused. Reed will probe your finances. He'll find the struggling business, the late payments, the unpaid invoices. He'll try to frame it as desperation. It was desperation, Ryan said. I've been struggling. I'm not going to lie about that. Good. Don't. Desperation that's honestly acknowledged is much harder to weaponize than desperation that's hidden. Cho set his pen down for the last time and leaned back slightly. Mr. Mitchell, I'm going to tell you something that I don't usually tell potential witnesses, because most potential witnesses don't earn it. Ryan waited. The story Reed is telling is that Victoria Sterling is compromised, too personal, too emotional, making business decisions based on feeling rather than strategy. The evidence he's using is her record of investing in people and programs that don't show immediate financial returns. Chow paused. Your existence in this situation is, from Reed's perspective, both his best argument and his worst nightmare. How? You're his best argument because you're exactly the kind of person Victoria invests in, a small contractor, struggling, brought into a high-value situation based on a referral. He will say she's running a charity, not a company. Cho looked at Ryan directly. You're his worst nightmare because you found his documents, documented them with more rigor than his own people did, spent your personal time analyzing them, and then came to a lawyer's office and gave me the most organized and honest account I've heard in years. Ryan was quiet. You're not a charity case, Cho said. You're evidence. He was in the parking garage, keys in hand, when his phone rang. Unknown number, but not a spam number. The prefix was local, a different exchange than the spam calls he knew. He answered. Ryan Mitchell. The voice was Reed's. Smooth, unhurried. The same pleasant register as their conversation by the truck. Ryan stood beside his truck in the parking garage and said nothing for a moment. Mr. Reed, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. What do you want? A short pause, the pause of a man who appreciated directness even when it was aimed at him. I want to have an honest conversation, Reed said. The kind that's easier to have privately than in other contexts. We're having it. There's a project I've been developing. A commercial renovation contract, 3 properties, mixed use, historic preservation requirements. The kind of work that requires someone who understands materials and can be trusted to maintain quality over a long timeline. The budget is approximately $800,000 over 18 months. Ryan leaned against his truck. He did not say anything. I've been asking around, Reed continued. Your name came up more than once. People in the trades talk, and what they say about you is consistent quality work. Attention to detail, honest. I take those things seriously. You're offering me a contract, Ryan said. I'm offering you a conversation about a contract. The details would need to be worked out, but yes, that's the shape of it. $800,000. Ryan stood in the parking garage and let that number exist in his mind for a moment. The way you let a very bright light exist in your vision before you look away from it. 18 months of work. Real work, the kind he was built for. His truck paid off. Emma's school. The electric bill as a memory. Some margin between himself and the edge he'd been living near for 3 years. He thought about Sarah. The easiest money is usually the most expensive. What would I need to do for it? He asked. Nothing complicated. Finish your current work. Move forward. A pause perfectly timed, perfectly placed. Let certain things remain where they are. Let certain things remain where they are. The 11 o'clock meeting. The yellow legal pad. Martin Cho's voice. You're not a charity case. You're evidence. You want me to stay quiet, Ryan said. I want you to be smart, Reed said pleasantly. Which you clearly are. You understand how things work, how people at your level and people at mine have operated throughout history. I'm not asking you to do anything dishonest. I'm asking you to recognize where your expertise ends and where things outside your lane begin. Is that what this is? Out of my lane? You're a very skilled man, Ryan. The fence is excellent, I mean that sincerely. But the corporate governance of Sterling Global is not your domain. Getting involved in it won't serve you, and it won't change the outcome. Ryan was quiet for a long moment. He thought about Emma's school picture pack, the one she'd picked out, the one with the wallet-size prints she wanted to give to her teacher. He thought about the brake pads, still grinding on his truck. He thought about Danny asking, does this put me in a bad position, and the way Ryan had said no with complete confidence because he'd believed it. He thought about the look on Hawthorne's face when he'd handed over the short check. That particular mixture of charity and contempt. He thought about Victoria reading his notebook, turning the pages with her hands that were not entirely still. Mr. Reed, Ryan said, I appreciate the call, but I'm going to have to decline. A beat of silence. The first pause Reed hadn't controlled. That's a significant decision, Reed said. His voice had not changed, but something underneath it had. I want to make sure you understand the full picture. I understand it fine. You have a daughter, a business that's been struggling. No margin for error. Another pause. I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you that the path you're choosing has costs, and I want you to go into it with eyes open. My eyes have been open this whole time, Ryan said. That's the problem you have with me. The silence was longer this time. You're certain, I'm certain. A pause. Then all right, Ryan, I respect it. He ended the call. Ryan stood in the parking garage for a moment, alone with the sound of his own breathing and the distant echo of a car on a level above him. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from the particular release that comes when you've made a decision that cost you something real and you've made it anyway, and the thing it cost was worth it. He got in the truck.
He drove directly to Karen's house because she was the person he needed to talk to, and she only lived 20 minutes away.
And when she opened the door and looked at his face, she stepped back and said, "Kitchen. Sit down. I'll make coffee." He told her everything. All of it. From the Hawthorne job to the phone call that had ended 11 minutes ago. Karen sat across from him and listened the way she always listened, completely without interrupting, with the occasional expression that tracked her feelings about what she was hearing. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "He offered you $800,000, she said. "Yes, and you said no." Karen looked at him. She picked up her coffee cup and set it down without drinking from it. "You know," she said, Most people would. I know what most people would do. Ryan, I'm not criticizing you. She stopped. Started again. I've watched you struggle for 3 years. I've watched you not ask for help. I've watched you make Emma's lunches at 6 in the morning and drive a truck that sounds like it's in pain and tell me everything is fine when it clearly isn't. Her voice was steady, but the steadiness was an effort. And I need you to tell me, honestly, that you know what you just turned down. I know exactly what I turned down. Then tell me why. He held his coffee cup. Because Emma is watching everything I do, he said. She's 8 years old, and she's watching me to learn what a person is supposed to be. And I can't. He stopped, breathed. I can't have her grow up thinking that the right answer is stay quiet when you know something is wrong, because somebody offered you enough money. Karen looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached across the kitchen table and took his hand. She didn't say anything for a little while. Then Sarah would agree with you. I know, it doesn't make it less scary. No, it doesn't. Karen squeezed his hand and let go. What happens now? I called Martin Cho on the way here and told him about the call from Reed. He wants a written account, dated and time-stamped today. Is that good for Victoria's case? Cho says it shows Reed is nervous. That he's trying to contain the situation outside of official channels. Ryan paused. He used the word solicitation, he said. Depending on how the board interprets it, it could constitute an attempt to influence a potential witness. Karen absorbed that, Ryan. Be careful. I know. I mean it. This man has resources you don't. I know that too. So what do you do? He thought about his grandfather. About the notebook. About doing the work right and not needing to hide it. I write everything down, he said. I tell the truth. And I don't make myself small for people who don't deserve it. Karen looked at him. That last part, she said. That's Sarah. Yeah, she'd be furious with you for turning down $800,000. Ryan almost laughed. She'd be furious and proud at the same time. That was her specialty. They sat in Karen's kitchen in the early afternoon, and for a few minutes, it was just the two of them and the sound of the neighborhood outside, and the warmth of the house, and Ryan let himself feel that for a moment. Then he pulled out his notebook and started writing. 3 days passed. Ryan went back to regular work, the Carlisle job with Danny, a straightforward deck replacement that would pay about $4,000 and required no moral navigation whatsoever, which he appreciated. He talked to Martin Cho twice by phone. He wrote up his account of Reed's call in the specific factual language Cho had coached him to use, and he signed it and dated it and emailed it and mailed a hard copy. He told Emma a simplified version of events, not the money, not the threat, but the shape of it. That he'd found something at the Sterling job that mattered, that he'd reported it, that he might be asked some questions about it. Emma had listened with her chin in her hands. Are you scared? She'd asked. A little. Does she know you're helping her? The fence lady? Yes. Does that help? Knowing someone knows? Ryan had thought about that. Yeah, he said. It does, actually. Emma had nodded with the gravity of someone filing this information away for future use. On the third day, Victoria called. Not Margaret. Victoria herself from her personal cell number, which appeared on his phone as a number he didn't have in his contacts but recognized from her previous text. Martin told me about Reed's call, she said. I figured. How are you doing? He was in his truck in the Carlisle driveway. End of day, Danny already gone. He looked at his hands on the steering wheel, the knuckles rough, the hands of someone who'd spent 20 years working with them. I'm fine, he said. Then he caught himself. I'm actually fine. Not the version I say automatically. The 800,000s. Doesn't matter. It matters, Ryan. I know what it matters in the abstract. It doesn't change anything. He paused. Can I ask you something? Yes. The housings initiative Reed called sentimental. The workforce programs. The partnership agreements with smaller contractors. He paused. Are those actually profitable over the long term? A short silence on her end. The workforce programs are break-even over 5 years and generate significant value in terms of workforce pipeline and community partnerships. The housing initiative will return 4 times investment over a decade. The contractor partnerships cost marginally more on individual projects, but produce better quality outcomes and significantly lower warranty and rework costs. She paused. Reed is right that the quarterly numbers look softer. He is wrong about what the numbers mean. He's looking at the wrong time frame, Ryan said. Yes, that's a basic mistake. It is. but it's a mistake that looks like intelligence in the short term, which is how it survives. Ryan thought about that. He called what you do sentimental, he said. Investing in people who don't show immediate return. Yes, what do you call it? She was quiet for a moment. I call it the only thing that builds something worth having, she said. I've watched people optimize for quarterly returns for 20 years. I know what they build. I know how long it stands. A pause. I didn't start Sterling Global to build something that collapses the moment someone stops propping it up. Ryan looked at the Carlisle house, at the new deck boards he and Danny had laid that day. Clean lines, properly spaced, screwed from below so the surface was clean. The board meeting is when, he asked. 12 days. Do you need anything else from me before then? Martin has what he needs. You've done more than, she stopped, started again. You've done more than I had any right to expect. It's not about what you had a right to expect. No, Victoria said quietly. I know, he started the truck. I have a job tomorrow, he said. And the next day. But if Cho calls, I'll answer. I know you will. He pulled out of the Carlisle driveway and headed for home. The call he didn't see coming came on a Tuesday and Clytie morning 5 days before the board meeting at 6:42 a.m. while he was making Emma's lunch. It was a number he didn't know. State area code, different city. He answered. Mr. Mitchell, my name is Patricia Reyes. I'm a journalist with the Business Chronicle. Her voice was professional, calm. I'm doing a piece on the upcoming Sterling Global Board situation, and I was hoping you might be willing to speak with me. Ryan stood at the kitchen counter with a knife in one hand and Emma's sandwich half assembled on the cutting board. Who gave you my name? He asked. I'm not able to share my sources at this stage of reporting. But I want to be clear that I'm asking for your perspective, not to confirm or deny any specific claims. Ryan thought about Reed, about the precision of the contact, about the timing 5 days before the board meeting, early enough to do damage, late enough that there wasn't much time to respond. Miss Reyes, he said, did Alexander Reed or anyone connected to him suggest you contact me? A pause. I can't speak to my sourcing. That's a yes. Mr. Mitchell, I have nothing to tell you, he said. I did a fence repair job for Victoria Sterling. The fence is done. That's the extent of my relationship with the Sterling property. Our information suggests you may have found documents on the property that are relevant to. I have nothing to tell you, Ryan said again. Have a good morning. He ended the call. He stood at the counter for a moment. Then he finished making Emma's sandwich, cut it diagonally the way she liked, and called Martin Cho. Cho answered on the second ring. Ryan told him about the call. Cho was quiet for a count of 3. Reed is leaking, he said. He's trying to get the document story out before we present it in a context he controls. What does that mean for us? It means he's nervous. It also means we need to accelerate. Ryan heard paper moving in the background. I'm calling Victoria now. Can you be in my office at 2 o'clock today? I have a job in the morning. I can be there by 2. 2 o'clock. Bring everything you have, all of it. Ryan hung up and looked at the sandwich on the cutting board. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway in her school clothes. Backpack on, ready. The way she was always ready, organized, self-sufficient. Like she'd decided early that she wasn't going to be a source of extra difficulty in her father's life. She looked at his face. Dad, yeah, you're doing the right thing, aren't you? It wasn't a question. He picked up the sandwich and put it in her lunch bag. I think so, he said. Then it's okay to be scared. He looked at his daughter. Yeah, Em, he said. I know. He drove her to school, and then he drove to the Carlisle job, and he worked with everything he had until noon. Clean lines, proper spacing. Screwed from below. He told Danny he had an afternoon appointment, and Danny did not ask what kind. At 1:45, Ryan parked in the garage below Martin Cho's building and rode the elevator to the 14th floor. The waiting room was empty, except for Victoria Sterling, sitting in one of the chairs with her phone face down on the seat beside her, which, he was learning, was something she did when she'd decided to be fully present somewhere. She looked up when he walked in. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Victoria said, "Thank you for coming." "Of course," Ryan said. He sat down across from her. The afternoon light came through the windows at a low angle, and the city was quiet at this height, and there was something in the quality of the waiting, the way they both sat in it, that felt like before. Before the fence was finished, before the document, before Reed's call, Just two people who'd found in each other something they hadn't expected and were still figuring out what to do with it. "How is Emma?" Victoria asked. "She told me it's okay to be scared." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "She's right," she said. "I know." The door to Cho's office opened. Martin Cho looked at both of them with the focused expression of a man who'd been working since before sunrise and intended to keep going until this was done. "Come in," he said. "Both of you, we have work to do." They stood. They went in. Ryan thought, "Whatever comes next, I know who I am." He held on to that the way you hold on to a post that's properly set, concrete cured, wood sound, structure intact. Whatever comes next. Martin Cho worked like a man who understood that time was now the only resource that mattered. He spread everything across the conference table. Ryan's notebook pages, the original transcription, the LLC documentation, the maintenance logs from Sterling Manor, the signed and time-stamped account of Reed's phone call, the record of the journalist contact. He arranged them in a sequence that told a story, and then he walked both Ryan and Victoria through that story 3 times, until every element connected to every other element without gaps. "The board convenes in 5 days, Cho said. "Reed will present first. That's the standing order for a governance challenge. The challenger presents, then the responding party. He has 30 minutes. We have 30 minutes. He looked at Victoria. He's going to use the first 20 minutes to establish the pattern decisions he characterizes as emotionally driven, investments he'll frame as misallocated, the property deterioration as a symbol of distracted leadership. The last 10 minutes he'll spend on the fence, specifically." Victoria sat with her hands flat on the table. "He'll use the shadow assessment. He'll try. But here's the problem he's created for himself." Cho picked up the copy of Ryan's transcription. He commissioned a shadow assessment to document deterioration. What he actually documented, without knowing it, is that the deterioration was pre-existing, systemic, and structurally invisible, the kind of condition that requires expert evaluation to identify. And he left evidence of that assessment on the property, while a professional was actively documenting the opposite. "So he built our argument for us," Ryan said. "Partially. What he built was the foundation. What you built," Cho picked up Ryan's notebook, "is the structure." He set the notebook down in the center of the table. "Ryan, I'm going to ask you to testify before the board. Not as a formal witness in a legal proceeding, this isn't a courtroom, but as a professional presenting his documented assessment to a group of business people who need to understand what they're actually at." Cho looked at him steadily. "You'll speak for approximately 10 minutes. I'll guide you through it. You'll be questioned by board members and potentially by Reed's counsel. Reed has a lawyer there. He has the right to bring one as an advisor. He'll use that right." Cho folded his hands. "The lawyer will attempt to establish that you have a financial relationship with Victoria that compromises your objectivity. He'll probe your business history. He may raise your financial situation, the struggling company, the late payments, the general context of a man who needed money when Victoria offered him work." Ryan looked at the notebook in the center of the table. "And I just tell the truth," he said. "You tell the truth, and you let the documentation speak. You don't editorialize. You don't get defensive. You present what you found, how you found it, what it means technically, and you let the board draw conclusions. What if they don't draw the right ones?" Cho looked at him. "That's my job," he said. "Your job is to be exactly who you are." Ryan went home that night and sat at the kitchen table after Emma was in bed, and he did something he hadn't done in a long time. He talked to Sarah. Not out loud, he wasn't that far gone. But in the specific internal register he'd maintained since she died, the running conversation with her memory that he'd never quite been able to stop, and that he'd eventually decided he didn't want to stop. "I'm about to walk into a boardroom and tell 12 executives what I found in the dirt," he said to her. In his head, in the quiet kitchen. "One of them is going to try to make me look like I'm doing it for money. And the thing is, I could have had more money than I've ever seen. I could have taken it." I said no. He sat with the thought for a moment. "I think I understand now what you meant. The easiest money is usually the most expensive. Because it buys something from you that isn't for sale. And once you sell it, you can't get it back." He looked at the framed photo on the bookshelf. The beach, the red swimsuit, all 3 of them laughing. "Emma's going to be fine," he said. "Whatever happens." She's going to be fine because she's already who she needs to be. He sat there until he felt ready. Then he went to bed and slept 5 solid hours, which was the best sleep he'd gotten in a week. The morning of the board meeting, Emma made him breakfast. Real breakfast eggs, toast, the good orange juice she only brought out on what she considered important occasions. She put it on the table and sat across from him, with her chin in her hands, watching him eat with the serious attention she gave to things that mattered. "Are you ready?" she asked. "Getting there. Do you know what you're going to say?" "I know what's true. I'll say that." Emma considered this. Jalen had to present his science project last week in front of the whole class. He was really scared. She paused. But he said after that it wasn't as bad as being scared of it. Ryan looked at his daughter. "That's good advice, Em." "I know." She picked up her orange juice. "Also, your boots look good." He looked down. He'd polished them again that morning. He hadn't thought she'd noticed. "Thanks," he said. She smiled at him, the full smile, the one that looked completely like Sarah, and something settled in his chest. He could do this. He had always been able to do the thing that needed to be done. That was who he was. He drove her to school, watched her walk through the front door, with her backpack and her steady stride, and then he drove downtown. Sterling Global's boardroom was on the 32nd floor of the company's headquarters building, and it had the particular atmosphere of a room where significant decisions had been made for a long time. Not intimidating, exactly, but weighted. Like the air remembered things. 12 board members sat at an oval table of dark wood. They ranged from a woman in her 70s, who had the posture of someone who had been important for a very time, to a man in his late 30s who was taking notes on a tablet, with the focused energy of someone trying to establish himself. Most of them were in the 60 to 70 range, the particular type of American business executive who had built their positions through decades of navigating exactly the kind of situation currently in front of them. They looked at Ryan the way experienced people look at unexpected elements, not with hostility, but with calibrating attention. Alexander Reed sat to the right of the board chair, with a lawyer Ryan didn't know beside him. Reed was in a navy suit today. He was the most relaxed person in the room, which was a performance and a statement simultaneously. Victoria sat to the chair's left with Martin Cho beside her. She was still. Her hands were on the table, visible. Ryan sat in the chair that had been placed at the end of the table, not at the table itself, separate, the position of someone brought in to present information rather than participate in deliberation. He'd been told where to sit, and he'd sat there, and he'd spent the walk from the elevator to this chair reminding himself, documentation. Truth, let it speak. The board chair was a man named William Hartley, 71. Ryan had learned from Cho's briefing, former CEO of a manufacturing company, 17 years on this board. Known for procedural precision and a very low tolerance for waste of any kind, including wasted time. Hartley opened the session without ceremony. "This is a called session pursuant to Article 7 of the Sterling Global Governance Charter. Mr. Reed has submitted a formal motion of executive review with supporting documentation. 30 minutes for the motion, 30 minutes for response, 45 minutes for board deliberation and questions." He looked around the table. "Mr. Reed." Reed stood. He had his presentation clean slides, professional design, the kind that communicated money spent on its production. He moved through it with the ease of a man who had rehearsed this many times and was now simply executing a plan he already knew the shape of. The first 20 minutes were exactly what Cho had predicted. The pattern of decisions, the workforce programs, the housing initiative, the contractor partnerships, each one presented with the quarterly numbers. Each one framed as prioritizing optics over return, sentiment over strategy. He used the phrase mission drift 4 times. He used the phrase risk exposure 6 times. He was good. Ryan gave him that. He was genuinely good at this. At minute 22, Reed turned to a slide that showed Sterling Manor. "The clearest illustration of the pattern," Reed said, "is the physical management of Ms. Sterling's own estate. For the purposes of governance review, this is relevant because it reflects executive attention to assets, specifically whether critical infrastructure is being monitored and maintained at an appropriate standard." He clicked to the next slide. "Our independent assessment, commissioned in September, identified significant structural deterioration in the perimeter fence system deterioration that had progressed to the point of physical collapse in multiple sections." He clicked to a photograph. The collapsed fence section, taken from outside the property. It looked significant. Ryan had seen the same damage from the inside, and he had a different understanding of what it was. But from the outside, in this photograph, it looked like failure. We believe this reflects a broader pattern of distraction, Reed said smoothly. When a CEO cannot maintain her own property, Mr. Reed, Hartley's voice was calm and flat. Evidence-based claims only. Reed nodded graciously. Of course. The assessment documents are in your briefing packets. Tab C. He wrapped up his final 4 minutes with the particular cadence of a man who believed he had already won and was simply completing the formality. He sat down. Hartley looked at Victoria. Sterling. Your response. Victoria stood. She did not have slides. She had a single printed document, 1 page, which she set on the table without distributing it. Thank you, William. She looked around the table with the kind of steadiness that Ryan had first seen by the fence line, and now recognized as the thing that was most fundamentally her. I'm going to ask the board's permission to introduce supporting testimony from a professional who was directly involved with the fence situations. Mr. Reed just characterized. His name is Ryan Mitchell. He's the contractor who assessed and repaired the fence, and his professional documentation is what I'd like to present as the foundation of my response. Hartley looked at the board. 2 seconds of silent assessment. Any objection to hearing from Mr. Mitchell? Reed's lawyer leaned toward Reed. Reed listened, then said, No objection. We welcome the testimony. He said it. The way someone agrees to something they're certain will help them. Victoria sat. Hartley looked at Ryan. Mr. Mitchell. You may address the board. Ryan stood. He had his notebook with him. He had the assessment logs. He had the documentation that 4 days of careful work had produced. He looked at the 12 faces around the table, 12 people who had built careers on understanding what was real and what wasn't, and he spoke. My name is Ryan Mitchell. I own Mitchell Home Repair. I've been in the trades for 20 years, with a focus on structural assessment and restoration of residential and commercial wood frame structure. He kept his voice level and clear. I was hired by Sterling Manor's estate manager on September 7th to assess and repair a section of the perimeter fence that had sustained collapse. I want to walk you through what I found. He went through it the way Cho had coached him, methodically, specifically, with dates and measurements and findings documented at each stage. He explained the difference between storm damage and pre-existing structural decay. He explained why visual inspection couldn't detect subsurface fungal rot. He showed the maintenance logs alongside his own assessment records. He watched the board members who were following him closely, 3 of them, at least, who were leaning forward slightly, who were tracking the technical detail with the specific attention of people who had spent careers understanding how things actually fail versus how they appear to fail. He watched Reed. Reed's expression had not changed, but his lawyer was writing something on a notepad, and the angle of his pen told Ryan the notes were getting more urgent. The fence did not collapse due to negligence, Ryan said. It collapsed because decay that had been accumulating for 2 to 3 years, predating the current estate management arrangement, by at least 18 months finally reached the structural failure threshold during the September storms. The distinction matters. Negligence would mean the problem was visible and ignored. This problem was not visible. It required expert assessment to identify. He set his notebook on the table. I also want to tell the board about something I found during the repair work, he said. On the morning of day 4, a Wednesday, I have the timestamp. I discovered that one of my assessment markers had been disturbed. In the course of investigating that, I found a document buried in the soil near the base of one of the fence posts. He paused. The document was a property assessment of Sterling Manor. It had not been commissioned by Sterling Manor's management. The property address in the header matched. A secondary address in the margin led, after some research, to an LLC registered in Delaware 3 years ago, under the name Reed Capital Partners. The room was quiet, not the polite quiet of people being attentive, the specific quiet of a room in which something significant has just landed. I transcribed the legible portions of the document and brought them to Ms. Sterling's attention. My full transcription and the research on the LLC are in the documentation I submitted to her counsel, which I understand has been provided to the board. Ryan looked at Hartley. That's everything I have. Hartley looked at the board. Then at Reed. Reed's expression had still not changed. He was a man of considerable skill, and the skill was working. but Ryan could see at the edges of it in the particular stillness of his hands, in the way his lawyer had stopped writing, that something had shifted. Mr. Reed, Hartley said, "Do you wish to speak to the LLC reference?" "The LLC is a personal investment vehicle," Reed said. "The assessment was commissioned as part of a general market survey of comparable properties in the region. It was not specific to any governance question." "Then why was it on the Sterling property?" Hartley asked. "I can't speak to how it ended up there." "It ended up there," Ryan said, "without heat, without hostility, because someone brought it onto the property through the secondary gate, and it was lost or left during a perimeter walkthrough." Every head in the room turned toward him. Ryan kept his eyes on Hartley. "I'm not speculating about intent. I'm describing the physical evidence. The document was buried shallow in the location I described, in an area where no other foreign material was present. The timeline aligns with a vehicle access event through the secondary gate on Tuesday of that week, which the estate's gate log can confirm." Hartley turned to Victoria. "Miss Sterling, do you have the gate log?" Martin Cho set a document on the table. "Tab D," he said quietly. 3 board members reached for their briefing packets simultaneously. Reed's lawyer asked for a 15-minute recess before the board questions. Hartley granted it without comment. Ryan stepped out into the corridor. Victoria was beside him. Cho was on his phone, moving in the tight, efficient way of someone deploying information quickly to where it was needed. Victoria looked at the wall across from them. "You were very clear in there," she said. "I said what I found. You said it in a way they could follow." She paused. "Some people know the truth but can't make other people see it. You don't have that problem." Ryan looked at the closed boardroom door. "Reed's going to push back on the LLC. He'll have an explanation ready." "He'll have a story ready," Victoria said. "Stories and explanations aren't the same thing. The board knows the difference. Do they always act on it?" She was quiet for a moment. "Not always," she said honestly. "Sometimes they choose the story because the explanation asks too much of them." She turned to look at him. "But this board, Hartley, and the 3 on his left, they've seen too much to prefer comfortable stories. They'll choose right. How do you know? Because I've watched them for 6 years." She almost smiled. "The same way you know which posts are solid. You put pressure on them and see what happens." The recess ended. They went back in. Reed's lawyer, whose name Ryan learned was Howard Prentice, was a different kind of skilled than Reed. Reed was smooth. Prentice was precise, surgical, the kind of precision that was designed to find the weakness in a structure and apply force directly to it. He stood for the questioning period and looked at Ryan. "Mr. Mitchell, your company, Mitchell Home Repair, is currently experiencing financial difficulties. Is that correct?" "My company has had a challenging period." "Yes. How would you characterize its current financial position?" "Tight. We've had revenue shortfalls and rising operating costs. It's a difficult market for small contractors. In the week prior to being contacted by Sterling Manor's estate manager, you walked away from a paying job due to a payment dispute. Correct?" Ryan didn't flinch. "Correct. So when you were contacted for this job, you were in a financially precarious situation." "I was, and Miss Sterling paid you above your stated rate. 15% above. She paid a 15% quality supplement. It's in my invoice. A supplement you received after discovering a document that supported her position in a governance dispute." Ryan looked at Prentice directly. "I received the supplement because my assessment documentation was thorough and my work was done to a high standard. The timing of the payment was determined by the completion of the job. The document was found before either the payment or the supplement was discussed." He paused one count. "The gate log records and my GPS timestamps can confirm the sequence. It's all in the documentation you've had since Tuesday." Prentice made a note. He didn't push that angle again. "Mr. Mitchell, you described Alexander Reed approaching you at the job site. You characterized his words as implying that Miss Sterling's trust in you could be exploited. Did Mr. Reed explicitly say that?" "No," he said. "She extends trust quickly and that it can be a vulnerability." That could be read as a general observation about her business style. It could. In context, after he'd asked where I'd gotten the referral, confirmed my business size, established that I was a new and sole connection to the property, it read differently. How did it read? Like a man finding out whether I was the kind of person he could work with. Prentice looked at his notes, and subsequently Mr. Reed contacted you by phone and offered you what you characterized as a construction contract. He offered me a conversation about a contract. He described it as approximately $800,000 over 18 months. And you declined. I did. The room was very quiet. Ryan thought about how to say it. He thought about the kitchen table, about Sarah's voice in his head, about Emma's face at breakfast that morning. He said, because he told me the condition was staying quiet. And staying quiet when you know something is wrong is not something I'm able to sell. Prentice looked at him for a long moment. He closed his notebook. No further questions, he said. The board deliberated for 38 minutes. Ryan waited in the corridor with Cho, who drank 3 cups of terrible coffee from the floor's common area, and made 12 phone calls Ryan could only partially hear. Victoria waited in a separate anteroom. She'd asked for the space, and Cho had arranged it without question. At minute 31, Ryan's phone buzzed. Emma, from the school number. He answered. Hey, hi. Her voice was careful, which meant she was in a semi-public location and managing her volume. How did it go? We're waiting for the decision. Oh, a pause. Are you okay? I'm okay. Were you scared? He thought about standing up in that room, about Prentice's precise surgical questions, about the 12 faces tracking him. Yeah, but it wasn't as bad as being scared of it. He heard her smile through the phone. Jalen says that too, she said. You're at school. It's lunch. I just wanted to check. A pause. Dad? Yeah, whatever happens, I think you did the right thing. He sat in the corridor outside Sterling Global's boardroom on the 32nd floor, watching Martin Cho drink terrible coffee and make phone calls, and he held the phone against his ear and let his daughter's voice be exactly what it was. I know him, he said. I know. The boardroom door opened. Hartley stood in the doorway. Mr. Cho, we're ready. They filed back in. Ryan took his position. Victoria came from the anteroom and took her seat, and whatever she'd been doing in there, whatever she'd been thinking or feeling, it was filed away now, behind that stillness she carried. Reed sat where he'd been. His lawyer was very composed. Reed was very composed. 2 composed men waiting. Hartley set his notes on the table. The board has reviewed the motion of executive review submitted by Mr. Reed, the response submitted by Ms. Sterling, the supporting documentation from both parties, and the testimony of Mr. Mitchell. He looked around the table with the gravity of a man who had spent 17 years in this room making decisions that had consequences. The motion is denied. Reed did not move. The board finds that the investments characterized in the motion as strategic failures reflect a long-term approach to value creation that falls within the legitimate exercise of executive discretion. The returns on the relevant programs, reviewed in their full timeline, are consistent with sound business strategy. Hartley looked at his notes. Furthermore, the board finds that the property management issue referenced in the motion has been addressed professionally and with appropriate documentation, and does not constitute evidence of managerial neglect. He set his notes down. Additionally, the board finds the circumstances surrounding the shadow property assessment, specifically its unauthorized nature, its source, and its physical placement on the subject property, to raise questions regarding the conduct underlying this motion. The board has directed legal counsel to review those circumstances separately. Reed's lawyer was writing. Reed was looking at the table. This session is concluded, Hartley said. Victoria, a word before you leave. Victoria stood. Around the table, board members began gathering their materials. 2 of them, the woman in her 70s, and the man in his late 30s, looked at Ryan as they left. The woman nodded once, a small, precise acknowledgement. The man gave him something close to a genuine smile. Ryan picked up his notebook. He became aware of Reed standing on the other side of the table, close enough that the distance between them was a negotiated thing. Reed looked at him, the camera lens eyes, taking in information, giving nothing back. But something underneath them had shifted, something very small, barely visible, the way a surface shows the first signs of pressure, long before anything breaks. You're a skilled man, Reed said. You mentioned. I mean it differently now. He held Ryan's gaze for a moment. You chose hard. I chose right, Ryan said. Hard and right aren't the same thing. Reed looked at him for one more second. Then he walked out. Ryan stood in the emptying boardroom and breathed. Cho appeared at his shoulder. Clean, he said quietly. Exactly what I needed you to do, and you did it. What happens to Reed? That's above my pay grade at this point. The separate review Hartley mentioned. That's not my proceeding. It's the board's. Cho picked up his documents. My job was keeping Victoria's position secure. That job is done. And Reed? Cho looked at him with the particular expression of a man who had been in corporate litigation for 26 years. People who operate the way he operated in the space between permissible and ethical eventually run out of space, he said. It takes as long as it takes, but the board knows what they know now. He picked up his briefcase. You did good work, Ryan. He walked out. Ryan stood alone in the boardroom for a moment, in the weighted air of the room where decisions lived, and then he walked to the window and looked at the city. 32 floors down, people moved on the sidewalks in the particular organized randomness of a city in motion. Cars, pedestrians, delivery trucks, a man on a bicycle weaving through the stopped traffic. All of it continuous, indifferent to what had just happened in this room, going on exactly as it would have gone on if Ryan Mitchell had taken the $800,000 and driven home and never come back, he thought. But I didn't. He turned from the window. Victoria was standing in the doorway. They looked at each other across the empty boardroom, the length of the oval table between them, the dark wood and the weighted air, and for a moment neither of them said anything because there wasn't a word that fit the moment precisely enough. Then Victoria walked toward him. She stopped about 3 feet away, close enough for the conversation to be private, far enough to be exact about the distance. It's over, she said. For now, Ryan said. She almost smiled. You're not going to let me have an uncomplicated moment, are you? I'm not trying to take it from you. I don't know how to do uncomplicated. Neither do I. She looked at the table, at the cleared surfaces, at the room returning to its neutral state. The board, finding the separate review of Reed's conduct, that will take time. It may not result in anything formal. These things often don't. I know, but it's on the record. What he did is on the record. Yes, she looked at him. I want to talk to you about something, she said. Not today, today has been enough, but soon. About what? About what comes next. She held his gaze, for both of us. Ryan looked at her and recognized the expression on her face, not quite professional, not quite personal, something in between that didn't have a simple name. The expression of someone who had been alone in a hard position for a long time and was beginning carefully and without rushing it to consider what a different arrangement might look like. He knew that expression. He'd worn it himself. Okay, he said. She nodded. And then she did something he hadn't seen her do before. She let the stillness drop, just for a second, just enough to show what was underneath it. She looked tired. She looked relieved. She looked like a person who had been holding something very heavy for a very long time and had just for the first time in a while been allowed to set it down. Thank you, Ryan, she said. Not in the specific way she'd said it before, though that had been real. In a different way. The way you thank someone when the word has to carry everything you don't have words for. He looked at her, the billionaire CEO, who didn't know how to receive kindness, standing in her own boardroom after winning a fight she hadn't been able to fight alone. Go home, he said gently. Rest, we can talk soon. She looked at him for one more moment. Then she walked out. Ryan stood in the boardroom alone. He looked at the window, at the city, at all of it going on. Then he picked up his notebook, put it in his jacket, and walked out after her. In the elevator going down, he called Emma's cell. She was in class, he knew. She wouldn't answer, but he needed to say the words somewhere. The call went to voicemail. Hey Em, it's me. Everything went okay. I'll tell you everything tonight. He paused, watching the floor numbers drop. I love you. See you at 3:30. He hung up. The elevator reached the lobby. He walked out into the afternoon, into the city, into the continuous, ordinary, indifferent motion of everything going forward. He had work tomorrow. The Carlisle deck had 2 more days on it. Danny would be there at 7. The brake pads on his truck needed to be dealt with this weekend. He had work. He had Emma. He had himself intact, the same person who'd walked into Sterling Manor with a worn toolbox and an old truck and nothing but what he knew how to do. He walked to his truck and got in. He sat for a moment with his hands on the steering wheel. He thought, Sarah, I kept the promise. He started the truck. He drove home. The call came on a Thursday morning, 11 days after the board meeting. Ryan was under the Carlisle deck when his phone rang on his back in the dirt, checking the joist hangers on the final beam run. The kind of work that required patience and a willingness to be uncomfortable. He almost let it go to voicemail. Then he saw the number. Victoria. He slid out from under the deck and answered. "Are you busy?" she asked. "I can talk. I'd like to meet." "Not the house, somewhere neutral. There's a coffee place on Meridian called Harlow's." "Do you know it?" He knew it. He'd gotten coffee there exactly once, 2 years ago, when a client nearby had paid him on time, and he'd celebrated by spending $4 on something that wasn't gas station coffee. "I know it," he said. "Noon, if you're available." "I'll be there." He went back under the deck and finished the joist hangers. He worked with the particular focus that came when his mind was occupied with something else, cleaner work. Sometimes, when the conscious part of his brain was elsewhere and his hands just did what they knew. He thought about what comes next, what she'd said in the boardroom. For both of us, he didn't try to predict it. Predicting things was how you built expectations that didn't fit reality. He'd learned that 3 years ago, when a diagnosis had turned a Tuesday in October into the before and after line of his entire life. He finished the joists and went to wash up. Harlow's was the kind of coffee shop that had been in the same location for 20 years and had somehow survived every economic shift and trend cycle by being exactly what it was: good coffee, small tables, no pretense, the kind of place where people actually talk to each other instead of at their laptops. Victoria was already there when Ryan arrived at a corner table, in jeans and a dark sweater. No assistant, no phone visible, no "the CEO's here" energy. She looked like a person who had slept well for the first time in a while, which was a specific kind of visible. She had 2 coffees on the table. He sat down. "I took a guess," she said, nodding at the second cup. "Black." "That's right." I asked the woman at the counter what a carpenter would drink. She said black without hesitating. Ryan picked up the cup. "Sounds about right." They sat with that for a moment, the comfortable kind of quiet that had developed between them, gradually, the way most real things develop, without announcement. Then Victoria set her cup down and looked at him directly. "I want to offer you a position," she said. "A real one. Not a fence job. A role inside Sterling Global." Ryan held his coffee cup and waited. "I've been building toward a restoration division for 2 years," she said. "The housing initiative, the one Reed called sentimental, requires a team that understands how to assess and rehabilitate existing structures rather than demolishing and rebuilding. It's better economics over a full project lifecycle, and it preserves community infrastructure. But I've been running it without the right person at the head of it." She paused. "I want that person to be you." Ryan was quiet. The title would be Director of Restoration Services. You'd oversee project assessment, contractor sourcing, quality standards, and team development across the division. The salary is $140,000 to start, reviewed at 6 months. Company vehicle, health coverage for you and Emma, retirement matching. She held his gaze. The division currently has 3 active projects. I expect it to have 12 within 2 years. The number sat in the air between them. $140,000. Ryan thought about $340 in a checking account. About $7 of gas. About the past stamp in red letters. He let himself feel the distance between that and this, without looking away from it. Then he said, "Why me?" "Because you know how to look at something damaged and tell the difference between what's worth saving and what's gone. Because you document everything. When someone offered you more than you've probably ever seen in exchange for staying quiet, you said no." She picked up her coffee. "And because the people the housing initiative is supposed to help are people like you. I want someone running it who understands that from the inside, not from a case study." Ryan looked at his coffee cup. He thought about Danny. About Mitchell Home Repair, the company his grandfather's work ethic had built the foundation for, even if Ryan had built it alone. "What happens to my company?" he asked. "That's your decision, not mine." Some people in similar roles maintain a small independent practice alongside the full-time work. Some transition fully. Some use the resources of a larger organization to grow what they built. She set her cup down. "I'm not asking you to erase what you built. I'm asking you to build something bigger with it." Ryan looked at her. "Danny Okafor," he said, "my partner. He's as good as I am, better in some things. If I'm building a team, I want him on it." Something moved across Victoria's face that was close to satisfaction. "Send me his information. He'll need a real salary, not a day rate. Done. And the contractors we source for the division, I want small operators in the mix. People who do good work and don't have the connections to get in front of companies like this, normally. That's the model I've been trying to build, Victoria said. That's why I need someone who knows those people. Ryan looked at the table between them, at the 2 coffee cups, at the ordinary Thursday noon light coming through Harlow's front window. He thought about Emma at breakfast, the eggs and the good orange juice, her face when she'd said, "I think you did the right thing." He thought about Karen saying, "Pay attention to it." He thought about Sarah, not the hospital, not the end, but the beach, the red swimsuit, the 3 of them laughing at something gone to time. He thought about his grandfather, who had believed that anything worth making was worth making right. "Okay," Ryan said. Victoria looked at him. "Okay? Yes, I'll take it." She held his gaze for a moment, checking, the way she checked everything, not from distrust, but from the habit of a person who had learned to verify what was real. Then she nodded. "Good," she said. They shook hands across the small table. Not the ceremonial kind of handshake, the kind performed for rooms full of people. The kind between 2 people who mean it. Ryan picked up his coffee. "One question," he said. "Go ahead. The housing initiative. The 2 districts. Are they going to be okay? The actual people in them. Is the program going to deliver what it's supposed to?" Victoria looked at him steadily. "That's why I need you to run it," she said. He picked Emma up from school that afternoon at 3:30, the way he always did. She came through the front door in her regular way, backpack, steady stride, already scanning for his truck in the pickup line. She found it, found him, and climbed in. She looked at his face. "Something happened," she said. "Something good." She turned in her seat to face him properly, the way she did when she wanted his full attention. "Tell me." So he told her. All of it, the coffee shop, the offer, the number, the division, Danny. He told her about the housing initiative and what it was supposed to do and why Victoria needed someone who understood it from the inside. Emma listened, without interrupting, which was unusual, which told him she understood this was different from the other things he told her about work. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "So you'd have a real job," she said. "Like with insurance and stuff. Health insurance for both of us." "Yes, and a car, a company vehicle." Emma looked at her hands in her lap. He could see her processing it, not just the practical details, but the shape of what it meant. The way a life looked different when the ground under it was stable. "Would you miss fixing things?" she asked. "Like just you fixing things?" Ryan thought about that honestly. "I'll still be fixing things," he said. "Just more of them. And I'll be helping other people fix things too." Emma considered this, like teaching, a little like that. She looked at him. "Mom used to say you were the best teacher she knew, because you never made people feel stupid for not knowing something." Ryan kept his eyes on the road. "She said that when I was little. I remember it." He drove for a moment in the quiet of that. He said. "Yeah, are you okay with this? With things changing?" She looked at him with the steadiness she'd carried. Since she was small, those dark eyes. Sarah's eyes, seeing further than she let on. "Dad," she said, "things already changed. They changed a long time ago." She paused. "This is just things changing in a good direction." He reached over and squeezed her hand once quick. She let him. He called Karen that evening. She answered, before the second ring, which meant she'd been waiting. "Tell me everything," she said. He told her. The silence on her end afterward was the kind that had texture, the specific texture of someone trying to hold a feeling carefully because it was almost too much to hold. "Ryan," she said, "I know. 140. I know. And Emma's insurance, Karen. I need a second." He gave her the second. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I'm good." Her voice had changed, not softer, exactly, but opened in some way. "Ryan, I need to tell you something, and I need you to actually hear it." "Go ahead." "I've watched you hold things together for 3 years, with nothing but your own hands and your own back, and your own stubborn belief that you owed Emma a whole life, even when yours felt like it was in pieces." She stopped, started again. "I've watched you go to jobs for people who treated you like furniture. I've watched you come home and make dinner and sit with her at that kitchen table, like the day hadn't tried to take everything from you." A pause. "You did that. Every single day. You did that. And I need you to know that what happened to you this week, the offer, all of it, you didn't get lucky. You earned it. You have been earning it for 3 years." Ryan sat at the kitchen table, in the quiet of the house, Emma asleep down the hall. He didn't say anything for a moment. Sarah would have had something to say about all this. he managed. She'd have said I told you so, and then made you explain every detail twice. He laughed. It came out rough and real and surprised him. Yeah, he said. She would've. She'd be proud of you, Karen said. I know you know that, but I'm saying it anyway. I know, he said. I know. 6 months later, the Mitchell Housing Initiative officially called the Sterling Restoration Program, though most of the crew just called it the Mitchell Program because that's who ran it, had 7 active projects across the 2 districts. Ryan had hired Danny as senior supervisor. Danny had shown up on his first day with his work boots and his level, and the expression of a man trying to process a situation that he hadn't quite believed was real until he was standing in it. And then he'd put his level on the first beam of the first project and found it plumb and said, "All right. What's next?" That was Danny. That was how Ryan had always known him. That was why Ryan had wanted him there. The crew they'd assembled was 12 people, a mixture of independent contractors, recent trade school graduates, and 3 men who'd come through a workforce re-entry program that Ryan had pushed Victoria to partner with. People who knew what it was to be skilled and overlooked. People who understood, from the inside, the difference between having a chance and not having one. Ryan ran the assessments himself on every new project. He still went out with a pocket knife and a notebook and crouched in the dirt and tested the wood. Danny told him he could delegate that now. Ryan told Danny that was not going to happen. Danny told him he was a weird dude. Ryan said he'd mentioned it. Emma turned 9 in December as promised. Ryan took her and 3 of her friends to the Science Museum downtown, which had a new exhibit on structural engineering that Emma had requested with the specificity of a person who knew exactly what she wanted. She spent 45 minutes at the interactive load-bearing display, adding weight to miniature bridge designs until they failed, noting which structures held longest and why, while her friends drifted to the exhibits with more blinking lights. Ryan watched his daughter from across the room, her serious dark eyes tracking the failure points. Her notebook, she had a notebook now, small blue, the kind that fit in a jacket pocket open in her hand. He thought, she's going to be something extraordinary. Then he corrected himself. She already was. On the 6-month anniversary of the board meeting, Ryan drove out to Sterling Manor. Not for work. He hadn't been back to the property since the fence job. But Victoria had called that morning and asked if he'd come by no particular urgency, she'd said. She just wanted him to see something. Margaret met him at the gate, the way she always had, checked nothing, just waved him through. Because by this point, Ryan Mitchell coming onto the property needed no verification. Victoria was waiting at the fence line, the fence he'd built. She was standing in front of it with her hands in her jacket pockets, looking at it the way Ryan had seen her look at things she was thinking carefully about. He walked over and stood beside her. They looked at the fence together. It was holding perfectly. The new cedar had weathered to match the older sections better than Ryan had expected. That particular silver gray that old-growth cedar went to in the sun and the seasons. The posts were plumb. The rails were true. The whole structure was exactly what it had been designed to be. I come out here sometimes, Victoria said, when something at the company is complicated and I need to think. She paused. I'm not sure why this particular spot. Ryan looked at the fence. Because it's solid, he said. You know it's solid. It helps to stand next to something you know is solid. She was quiet for a moment. The board formally referred Reed's conduct to the State Attorney General's office last week, she said. For review of the LLC activities. Will it go anywhere? I don't know. Martin says these things take time. But it's on the record. She paused. He's no longer a partner. Ryan nodded. The housing initiative, she said. The report from the first 2 completed projects came in yesterday. The return metrics are ahead of projection. Danny's thorough. It's not just Danny. She looked at him. The contractor relationships you've built, the smaller operators you've brought in, the rework rate, is the lowest the company has seen on comparable projects. By a significant margin. Good work produces good numbers, Ryan said. It's not complicated. No, Victoria said, it isn't. We just forget it sometimes. She looked back at the fence. Ryan, yeah. When I hired you to fix this fence, I thought I was solving a problem. I thought I was managing a situation before it could be used against me. A pause. I didn't understand what I was actually doing. He waited. I was making a decision about what kind of person to trust. And that decision changed more than I expected. She turned to look at him directly. You changed more than I expected. Ryan looked at the woman beside him, the one who had opened her own front door in jeans and a gray pullover, who had crouched over a pile of collapsed fence rails and actually looked at what he was showing her, who had said thank you, like she meant it specifically. "You were already changing," he said. "You'd been trying to build something real for a long time. You just needed someone to stop telling you that real was a liability." She looked at him for a moment. "Is that what you did?" "I told you the truth about a fence," he said. "The rest of it you did yourself." Something moved across her face, that thing he'd seen only a few times. The thing that happened when the professional surface dropped briefly and showed what was underneath. Not vulnerable. More precise than that. More like the look of someone who had carried something difficult for a very long time and had finally found solid ground beneath her feet. "Thank you," she said. "The specific way. The way that carried everything without needing to name it." He nodded. They stood together at the fence in the cold morning air, and the property was quiet around them, and the cedar held. That evening, Ryan sat at the kitchen table after dinner. The real kind of dinner now. Not survival food. Not what was left in the refrigerator toward the end of the pay period, but a meal he'd made with care because he had the time and the margin to make it with care. Emma sat across from him doing homework, her blue notebook open beside her textbook, her pencil moving. Ryan had his own notebook out the
one from the fence job, filled now with assessment log, measurements,
and the careful record of what he'd found and when and why it mattered. He'd started a new notebook for the restoration program. The old one sat on his bookshelf now, between two books his grandfather had given him. He looked at his daughter in the kitchen light. He thought about everything it had taken to get to this table. Not just the fence, not just the board meeting, not just the specific sequence of choices made in the right direction, at the right cost. All of it further back the years of learning his trade from a man who believed that anything worth making was worth making right. The marriage to a woman who saw him clearly and loved what she saw. The years of keeping promises to a daughter who deserved better than survival and had never once complained that survival was what she was getting. He thought about the check he'd left on Hawthorne's marble counter, the $7 of gas, the past due stamp in red. He thought about a damaged fence that looked perfect from the outside. He thought about what it meant to test something, to put pressure on it, and see what it was actually made of. He knew what he was made of. Emma looked up from her homework and found him looking at her. "What?" she asked. "Nothing, just looking." She studied him for a moment with those dark eyes, Sarah's eyes, serious and steady and capable of seeing further than anyone gave her credit for. "You're happy," she said, like she was confirming something. Ryan Mitchell looked at his daughter across the kitchen table, in the warm light of a house that was theirs, in the quiet of an evening that had no emergency in it, in the life he had rebuilt from the ground up, with nothing but his hands and his integrity, and the refusal to let the hardest years be the final answer about who he was. "Yeah, Em," he said, "I am." And that was the truest thing he'd said in years. Not the careful version, not the version he offered to protect people from worrying, not the version that kept the distance between himself and the edge from being visible. The real version, the one with nothing hidden underneath. Ryan Mitchell had not become who he was because someone powerful decided to save him. He had become who he was because, in the moments when the easiest choice was also the wrong one, he had chosen right every time, at every cost, without flinching. And in the end, the life he had was not something that had been given to him. It was something he had built, the way he built everything from the ground up, one solid post at a time, with his name on every piece of work, and nothing underneath it that he needed to hide.